Chapter 1179. Li Nanheng obviously didn't want to answer it. Since he didn't want to answer the call, it meant that he really had something to do. After being pulled across the overpass by the man and was about to return to the hotel next to the department store, his cell phone rang again. This time, Feng Ling suddenly stopped, reached out to take out the cell phone in his coat pocket, and looked down to see that the call was from the base hall. She immediately rolled her eyes at Li Nanheng. It's from the base hall. The base hall would directly call Li Nanheng's private cell phone. In this case, there must be something urgent. Li Nanheng's attitude in front of her was different from his attitude towards 11 base. 11 base was his responsibility. He was rarely so irrational that he didn't even care about the affairs of the base. It could be seen that he was really suffocating. Glancing at her serious expression, Li Nanheng sighed, picked up the phone, and took it with an ugly expression. After listening to a few words, he said indifferently, "I see." With just 3 words, the man hung up the phone. What's wrong? Was the call from a phone? I think there should be a private number card in this cell phone. He must be in a hurry to make a private call, Feng Ling said. After learning what happened in Cambodia, the U.S. military wants to deal with the outlaws who were captured alive and the innocent children who were killed in the explosion. For so many years, they never let go of any opportunity to stir up trouble. What do you think they want to do? They are looking for an opportunity to step on it. Even if they may step on nothing in the end, they still won't easily miss the opportunity. When we were waiting for the U.S. police to send a rescue plane, I didn't see any movement from the military. Seeing that we came back alive, they seized the opportunity when I wasn't in the base to stir up trouble. That's right. What do you think? So? They are all in the base. Feng has temporarily stabilized them. Wait for me to go back and confront them personally. Hearing this, Feng Ling's reason had returned to her own consciousness. The two of them stood on the side of the road and stood like this for a long time. Feng Ling took her hand out of his. Let's go back first. I'm going back to the hospital. Mrs. Mo is still waiting for me. The man glanced at her. Is Mrs. Mo more important or am I? Jealous of Jean Wan? Are you serious? Very serious. He was resolute. In the end, he didn't forcefully pull her hand down his body, but she could see the hidden fire in the man's eyes. But now was not the time. Besides, there were still soldiers waiting for them in the base. If it was just a trivial matter, Feng would have solved it himself. However, since Feng had called them repeatedly, it meant that the person who came this time was a tough one. If Boss Li didn't go back in person, it would not be easy to deal with him. Seeing his somewhat dejected expression because the meat that was about to reach his mouth suddenly flew away, he was like a big wolf dog that had almost snatched a piece of meat and suddenly realized that there was not even a shred of meat on the bone. His ears drooped. Feng Ling's heart trembled with shyness, but now she gradually calmed down and found that she was a little relieved. She didn't know what she was thinking, but she didn't want to see a man like Li Nanheng show such a disappointed and unwilling look. She suddenly took the initiative to lean into his arms, kissed him on the chin, and said softly, "I'll owe you. I'll wait for you to come back." The man's eyes lit up. He pinched her waist tightly and looked down at her. "Oh you?" There was a satisfied smile in his eyes. He was about to kiss her hard on the lips again, but when he was about to kiss her, he paused. He felt that he had finally sobered up after being splashed with cold water by those bastards in the military. If he kissed her again, let alone the military, even if the Emperor of Heaven wanted to blow up the base, he would definitely take her into the hotel. Li Nanheng raised his hand and rubbed her soft hair. "All right, I'll lend you to Jean Wan for a few more days. I think it's time to return you after everything is over. After all, High City isn't a place to stay for long." What he meant was that High City was too far, China was too far, and it was best for her to stay in Los Angeles by his side. Feng Ling knew that he was holding back his pain and did not provoke him or refute him. She only kissed his chin again. "Go." Li Nanheng's eyes darkened from the kiss. At this moment, his phone rang again. He immediately turned his head and rolled his eyes at the air. He took out his phone and saw that it was a call from Ah Leng again. With a cold expression, he turned and walked to the parking space by the roadside. Li Nanheng drove Feng Ling back to the hospital. When she got out of the car, the man had more or less calmed down. Earlier, she had heard him talking to the base. From his tone and decisiveness, she could tell that the military leaders who were taking the opportunity to cause trouble in the base were most likely going to lose their jobs. After getting out of the car, she turned back to look at the black Hummer that suddenly sped away. She felt that Li Nanheng's car was filled with murderous intent. Mr. Mo's condition had already stabilized, but he still needed to take his medicine and rest regularly. When Feng Ling left the hospital earlier, Mr. Mo was still resting. When she returned, she saw that Jean Wan was still in his ward and decided to sit on the chair outside to wait for her. Now that she had calmed down, she carefully recalled the conversation between Madame Feng and Li Nanheng in the coffee shop today. She pondered over it for a long time but could not understand what she had missed. Madame Feng's question to Li Nanheng was clearly serious and Li Nanheng's reply was also very serious. But this seriousness made her even more puzzled. Did Madame Feng not mind the relationship between her and Li Nanheng at all? Seeing Madame Feng's agitated emotions today, even if she did not really want to investigate her own background, she could vaguely sense that some things were not developing in the direction she could control. For example, the relationship between her and Li Nanheng, and Madame Feng's attitude toward their relationship. As she was thinking, the door to the ward opened and Jean Wan walked out. Seeing Feng Ling sitting outside, Jean Wan glanced at her. "You weren't in the hospital earlier. What did you go to do?" Feng Ling was thinking about Madame Feng. Hearing Jean Wan's question, her gaze faltered. She simply answered, "I dealt with some personal matters." Mr. Li must be suffocating to death, ha ha ha. Also, today, I suddenly wanted to share some heartfelt words with my family, so it took up a little more than 300 words. Please forgive me. To be honest, even I'm surprised by the results this book has achieved up to this point. Back then, when I wrote Immerse Wan, I only wanted to write a warm and sweet marriage novel. I didn't expect that I would win the Best Newcomer Award at the 2018 Yuan IP Awards and even appear on TV because of it. I also didn't expect that I would win the first place in the 2018 Chinese Romance Finals. I'm really gratified. Very happy. I am very grateful for everyone's love for Immerse Wan, for Ling Li, and for Qing Qing. Bow. Be grateful. As for the monthly votes, I usually only ask for them at the beginning and end of the month. Usually, I'm too embarrassed to ask for monthly votes every day. But thinking about it, it seems that I have received many honors and love. The only monthly vote that I managed to obtain was second place. Although I am already very happy, I also want to complete it once. Even if I can obtain first place for a month, it would be good. Currently, I am only 500 to 600 votes away from first place. There are still 9 days until the end of the month. I also feel too embarrassed to ask for monthly votes so thick-skinned. How about this? If I can get first place in the monthly votes this month, on the 1st of next month, I will post an explosive high-speed race between Feng Ling and Li Nanheng for everyone on Weibo. The kind that transcends desire. Blushing. Chapter 1180. At night, the matter at the base would not be resolved so quickly, so Li Nanheng did not return to the hospital. After buying dinner for Jean Wan and Mr. Mo, Feng Ling sat down in the lounge of the hospital alone. There were several unread messages on her cell phone. She opened them and found that they were from people in Boston. Since leaving Boston, she hadn't contacted the people in the martial arts club. It was not that she was too indifferent to others, but that she had always been like this. She never took herself too seriously, didn't think that she was good, and didn't think that others would always miss her. The head coach sent a message to ask her how she was doing recently and why there was no news at all. She didn't reply to the messages sent by the boss, and even if she did reply, she would just say, "I'm fine." And Chen Beiqing, he called her several times, but she didn't answer, so he simply sent her a message instead. Chen Beiqing would send her a message almost every 2 or 3 days. He didn't pester her and didn't say much. He just asked her how she was doing recently and said that he would come to Los Angeles to see her when he had time. Seeing these messages, she thought about what Li Nanheng had done to her over the years. Perhaps it was because she had just seen the touching affection between Mr. Mo and Mrs. Mo in Cambodia, or because she had seen the people around her cherish each other after experiencing such a life-and-death disaster. She suddenly recalled the way she had always treated people and things. Perhaps there was no longer a need for her to hide herself in that huge protective shell. It was time to cherish those who treated her well and try to embrace their kindness instead of treating them cautiously, which would only increase the distance between them. Fong Ling picked up the pillow by the bed and held it in her arms. She was about to call the people in Boston and make an appointment to go back to meet them at a certain time in the future. After all, they had worked and lived together for more than a year, and she still had a new apartment that she hadn't lived in. Sooner or later, she would have to go there often. She couldn't just abandon these friends she had known. Her fingers were tapping on the screen, looking for their numbers in the address book, when her cell phone suddenly vibrated in her hand. Li Nanheng sent her a message. She held the pillow firmly in her arms and swiped open the message. Li Nanheng had a lot of things to do in the base. He had to go back to the Li family and go to the Los Angeles military base office tomorrow morning. By the time he returned to the hospital, it would be at least tomorrow afternoon. Then, he sent another message. After the incident with Li Nanheng, the military did not dare to provoke us again. This time, they recklessly used the incident in Cambodia as a topic. It just so happens that everything that needs to be solved has been solved. If there's anyone you don't like, tell me their name and I'll help you deal with them. Fong Ling looked at the 2 messages sent by this man and immediately replied. Fong Ling didn't find anyone unpleasant to the eye. Be careful. Why didn't Li Nanheng say that he owed me during the day? Why is he so distant from me in just a few hours? Fong Ling didn't. I didn't have much contact with the people in the military. It had been so long since the incident with the commander. Even if he was reincarnated, he would probably be a nobody. I didn't care much about those people. After she sent the message, she thought for a moment and sent another message. What time will you be back tomorrow afternoon? Li Nanheng, it's hard to say. Rest early. If you need anything, look for K. I'll drive past the hospital on my way back to the Li family at night. If I see the light in your room is still on, I won't go back to the Li family. I'll go straight to you. Fong Ling, I'll definitely go to bed early. Don't delay your business because of me. Li Nanheng, you're the business. Fong Ling, she paused. Let's talk about it when I come back tomorrow afternoon. You can go and do whatever you need to do. Li Nanheng is fine. He's still dealing with those bastards in the base. I'm sitting here drinking tea and leaving him hanging. I'm fine now. Li Nanheng, you should go to bed early and conserve energy to make up for me. Li Nanheng, you also know that you owe me too much. That time in Tea City, I was the one who forced you to sleep with me twice in a row. Now you want to take the initiative? Fong Ling, she changed the topic with a sullen expression. Li Nanheng, my mind is full of going to the hotel today. Do you think I might change the topic? Fong Ling didn't reply. After a moment, Li Nanheng sent, Miss me? Regarding the matter of going to the hotel, she didn't know how to reply and was too embarrassed to reply. However, she held her phone and stared at it for 5 minutes before replying. Fong Ling, N. This could be considered as her admitting her feelings verbally. Even if it was gradual, she couldn't always stand in a passive position, right? She had to learn to cherish it. Li Nanheng, forget it. I won't return to the Li family. You sleep first. At night, I'll go to the hospital to see you. If you're awake, I'll go to your place. If not, I'll go to Mo Jingshan's. Fong Ling, you should be busy with business. I'll definitely sleep. There's no need to come to the hospital. Li Nanheng couldn't bear to. I miss you. I won't be able to sleep well even if I return to the Li family. He was really very straightforward. Feng Ling gradually couldn't help smiling. Elder Li must have something important to talk to you about. Otherwise, you wouldn't have agreed to go back. It wouldn't be too late to come tomorrow. Li Nanheng, then sleep early. I'll allow you to miss me. Feng Ling, okay. Li Nanheng remembered what he said today. You still owe me. Feng Ling. I'll sleep. Feng Ling put down her phone. Her heart suddenly felt a little sweet. She instinctively hoped that Li Nanheng would come back immediately. However, he still needed to go to the base and the Li family. It was just one more day. It didn't matter. She threw her phone on the bed, picked up a change of clothes, and went to the public bathroom on this floor of the hospital to take a shower. This floor was full of high-class wards, but it was overcrowded. There were only 2 wards with separate bathrooms. Only the seriously injured Mr. Mo and Mrs. Mo could stay in them. Feng Ling wasn't seriously injured. She just needed to be taken care of here. The resting room she stayed in was already the best among all the resting rooms. However, the bathroom didn't have a separate bathroom, so she had to come out to take a shower. Fortunately, the conditions of this hospital were good. The environment was good, and the hygiene was also very good. Right now, there was no one in the public bathroom. After taking a shower, she went to Jin Wan's place. After chatting with Jin Wan for a while, she returned to the resting room to sleep. Although she said she was going to sleep, after lying down, she still picked up her phone and glanced at it. Li Nanheng didn't send her any more messages. She held the phone and read the conversation between the 2 of them over and over again. When she realized that she had been reading the conversation for so long and had been reading it over and over again, she immediately turned off the phone screen. In the darkness where the lights had been turned off, she opened her eyes and pressed the phone against her chest. This was the feeling of being in love, right? 4M. Chapter 1181. Last night, Mr. Mo's wound was a little inflamed. Jin Wan got up and went out of the ward to take care of him without telling anyone. The next morning, when Feng Ling learned about it, Mr. Mo had already fallen asleep, and Jin Wan had just returned to the ward. Mr. Mo's wound was inflamed, but it was not very serious. He just had a low fever last night. Jin Wan didn't like to be separated from Mr. Mo, so she took this opportunity to stay in his ward all night. Otherwise, she would definitely be driven back to rest by Mr. Mo. Knowing this, Feng Ling didn't ask any more questions. Feng Ling went to buy Jin Wan's favorite breakfast. Seeing that Jin Wan didn't want to sleep after coming back and didn't look very good because of staying up late, she thought of the things she bought yesterday and took them out. Mrs. Mo, do you want to put on a facial mask? Jin Wan was lying on the bed trying to fall asleep, but she couldn't fall asleep. Recently, Su Jilan had been visiting the hospital frequently, which made her worry. However, when Feng Ling approached the bed with the breakfast, her words made Jin Wan open her eyes. She sat up on the bed, saw the things in Feng Ling's hand, took them, and put all kinds of facial masks on her bed. Why did you buy these things? Jin Wan was surprised and couldn't imagine Feng Ling standing in front of the skincare counter. I've been in the hospital recently. Mr. Mo was seriously injured. You said you were fine, but you couldn't sleep every day. You don't look very good. I heard that women should often use facial masks when their skin condition is bad. I have never used this kind of thing, and I don't know which brand is better. When I went out to buy things, I bought a few in the mall. Hearing her words, Jin Wan picked up 2 of them and the corner of her mouth twitched. Sure enough, Feng Ling had never used skincare products, nor had she used facial masks. In addition to whitening and hydrating, there were even skin lifting, tightening, and wrinkle-removing products. Both of them were in their early 20s and their faces were full of collagen. How could they use these things? You haven't used them? Jin Wan suddenly smiled and looked up at her. As soon as Fong Ling saw Jean Wan's bright eyes, she immediately understood what she meant and quickly took a step back. Mrs. Mo, these are all for you. Even so, I don't need so much. Jean Wan picked up 2 of the simplest moisturizing masks and waved at her. Come here. Don't hide so far away. Anyway, we have nothing to do now. We might as well keep making facial masks instead of waiting in the hospital. Anyway, you've bought them. Seeing Fong Ling's determined expression, Jean Wan narrowed her eyes and smiled. You really don't want to try it? You've been in the base for so many years. Although your skin is good, it's still a little dry compared to those young ladies raised at home. Since you bought so many, why don't you try it with me? Fong Ling, forget it. I've never used such a thing before. Besides, why do I need such good skin? Jean Wan smiled. You really don't think of yourself as a woman anymore? Fong Ling hesitated because of his words. She was not feminine at all. What on earth was Li Nanheng infatuated with her? Since she didn't want to be passive anymore, shouldn't she try to accept some changes? She had to be worthy of his love for her. Am I really not like a woman? Do you feel like a woman when you look in the mirror? I rarely look in the mirror. Jean Wan, in the end, Fong Ling still failed to persuade Jean Wan. Jean Wan dragged her into the small bathroom in the ward and asked her to wash her face. She also took a black rubber band and tied the short bangs in front of Fong Ling's forehead into a high bun, exposing her face and forehead, and then taught her how to use this kind of bubble cleanser. The 2 women washed their faces in front of the mirror in the bathroom, rubbed bubbles on their faces, and then put a mask on their faces. At first, Fong Ling didn't even know how to apply it. Jean Wan taught her little by little, but unexpectedly, this woman who could shoot the whole world with a gun was defeated by a piece of facial mask paper. Finally, after Fong Ling tore up 3 facial masks, Jean Wan successfully put a complete facial mask on her face. None of the patients passing by outside the ward could imagine what the 2 people were doing in the midst of their busy schedule. A few minutes later, Kay came to knock on the door, and Jean Wan answered. Fong Ling just came out of the bathroom and didn't realize that someone was coming in, so when the door was pushed from the outside to the inside, Fong Ling suddenly stopped. Kay came to find Fong Ling, but he didn't expect to see the 2 of them as soon as he entered the door. There were a few holes in the white facial mask, and the 2 women stared at him with almost the same big eyes. Jean Wan was okay. After all, she was Mrs. Mo, the most famous lady in High City. Everyone loved beauty, let alone Mrs. Mo. But Fong Ling was applying a facial mask, which was more shocking. Looking at the thing on Fong Ling's face, Kay was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. He was even more surprised than when he learned that Fong Ling was a woman. As soon as Fong Ling saw his expression, she raised her hand and was about to take off the thing on her face. Kay, however, quickly raised his phone and took a photo of her. As soon as Fong Ling raised her hand, she froze. Why did you take a photo of me? Damn it, I've seen Fong Ling applying a facial mask before I was born. I must show this photo to boss. With that, Kay forgot why he came just now. Before Fong Ling went up to grab him, he opened the door and slipped out as if his soles were smeared with oil. Kay, delete the photo. Fong Ling's expression froze and she chased after him. Jean Wan looked speechlessly at the 2 people who flashed out like the wind. Not to mention that Kay was almost as good as Fong Ling, it was still unknown whether Fong Ling could catch up with him. After all, Kay was a man with long and flexible legs, but Fong Ling just went out with a facial mask on her face. Was she going to let the whole hospital see? Fong Ling chased him fast, and Kay ran away fast. He seemed to be afraid that she would catch up with him and smash his cell phone again. In order to protect himself, Kay ran directly to Mo Jingshan's ward area. When he came to the door of the ward, he saw Boss Lee coming out at this time, so he immediately stopped and hid behind him. Then he looked at Fong Ling, who had chased up to him, and smiled smugly, as if he was not afraid of death under the protection of Boss. Fong Ling thought that Li Nanheng would come back in the afternoon, but she didn't expect that he would return to the hospital so early. She suddenly stopped. 4M. Chapter 1182. Boss, don't sell me out. Kay hid behind Li Nanheng and whispered. Li Nanheng, who had just come out, didn't know what was going on, but he saw Feng Ling with a mask on her face. He didn't go back to the Li family last night. After learning that Mo Jingshan's wound was inflamed, he took the time to pass by and was about to drive back to the Li family. He didn't expect to see such a scene. What the hell are you doing? Li Nanheng gave her a strange look. If it weren't for the fact that he was too familiar with Feng Ling, he wouldn't have thought that this woman who ran out with a white thing on her was some kind of monster. Feng Ling, Li Nanheng reached out and peeled off the mask paper on Feng Ling's face. Seeing that her face was wet, he raised his eyebrows and touched her chin with his fingers, only to touch a wet and sticky essence. He didn't go to her room last night. Now that he had bumped into her, he wanted to say goodbye to his little wife before leaving. However, as a straight man, he had never used these things in his hands before. He shook his hand in disgust. What the hell is this? It's wet and sticky. Jean Wan came over after washing her face and heard Li Nanheng's complaints from a distance. Feng Ling felt a little embarrassed and was about to raise her sleeve to wipe her face, when Jean Wan hurriedly came forward and handed her the towel that had been washed with warm water, and then glanced at Kay and Li Nanheng. Sure enough, you can't blame my Feng Ling for not being feminine. She stays with you guys every day. It's strange that she can be feminine. Feng Ling's heart sank. She wanted to try to find some feminine feelings and try to change, but this first step was a big blow to her. She wiped her face with the towel, and the skin on her cheeks was a little red because she wiped too hard. Li Nanheng didn't sleep all night. In the first half of the night, he stayed in the base with the military people, thinking about Feng Ling. In the second half of the night, he went out to deal with things. Although he was not very sleepy, he was certainly not as energetic as usual. He glanced at Jean Wan and then at Feng Ling. Seeing that Feng Ling's face was slightly red from her own rubbing, she realized that her expression of disdain for the essence seemed to have hurt her. Li Nanheng was speechless. He really didn't dislike it. It was just that he, as a man, had never touched the essence on the mask. His first instinct was to feel awkward, so he just said it casually. He didn't know if she slept well last night, but he missed her so much that he couldn't fall asleep. You stayed in the ward all night last night and didn't rest today. You're really energetic, Li Nanheng said coldly to Jean Wan. Jean Wan and Li Nanheng often quarreled with each other, so she was used to it. However, she could see that Feng Ling was obviously in a bad mood, so she didn't say much but just gave Li Nanheng a good luck expression. You were talking to him in his ward just now. Did he fall asleep again? I'm not asleep. I just received a call from the company. Are you going to stay in his ward? Do you need me to ask the doctor to move your bed to this room so that you can stay here with him? Then you won't have to squeeze into the same bed. Li Nanheng teased her. Are you going to stay in his ward? Jean Wan knew he was teasing her, but she didn't refuse and smiled. It seems to be a good idea. Li Nanheng sneered. In your dreams. Mrs. Mo, I'm going to wash my face, Feng Ling said lightly at this time and turned to leave. Jean Wan turned back and was about to follow him, but before she took a step, Li Nanheng had already walked up to her with a strong desire to survive. Feng Ling, the man's voice was just behind her. Feng Ling didn't want to speak, so she didn't speak and went straight to her room. Stop. Don't stand. She silently replied with 2 words in her heart, rolled her eyes at the air, and continued to walk. The man was tall and had long legs, but Jean Wan and the others were still behind him, so he didn't rush. When he walked around the corner in front of the corridor, he quickly stepped forward, grabbed her arm, and pulled her back into his arms. Because Feng Ling walked too fast, she suddenly bumped into his arms and was about to struggle out of his arms. At this moment, the man raised his hand and caressed her face that hadn't been wiped clean. He held her face. I didn't mean what I said just now. Don't be angry. Fong Ling couldn't say she was angry. She just looked at him in a muffled voice and was about to turn her face away, but the man still held her face and refused to let go. At this moment, he didn't mind the essence that hadn't been wiped clean on both sides of her cheeks. You've never used this kind of thing before, and you suddenly used it. It's definitely related to Jean Wan. It's fine if you're willing, but if you're forcing yourself to become prettier and more beautiful, then let me tell you right now, you don't need to. Everything about you is already perfect in my eyes, and you don't need to deliberately make any changes. Li Nanheng knew Fong Ling too well. Someone like her would suddenly put on a mask and stick this cold and wet thing on her face. According to her behavior these days, he could see that she was just trying to change for him. Although he was very pleased with this reason, he didn't want her to force herself. Fong Ling didn't move and just raised her hand to touch the remaining essence on her cheeks. I didn't force myself. Li Nanheng then looked at the fringe on her forehead that was tied into a small bow on the top of her head. She was really invincibly cute. He smiled and raised his hand to touch her head again. You are very good now. When you were in your teens, you were still flat-chested. I liked you very much, let alone now. The man glanced at the part below her collar meaningfully. It's very perfect. There's no need to change. This man's words were quite pleasing to her, but he said that she used to be a small flat chest. Fong Ling stared at him for a long time and finally couldn't help replying, I wasn't flat before. I was wrapped in a chest cloth. Yes, it wasn't flat. After all, I touched it more than once when you were dressed in women's clothes. It really didn't feel flat. The man smiled. Fong Ling, her face was a little red. She didn't know how red it was because of the rubbing and the heat on her face. She turned around and said, let go of me first. I'll go back to wash my face. I have to go back to the Li family later. Why are you in a hurry to wash your face? Didn't you just wipe it? The man said as he pressed her against the wall by the elevator door, held her waist, and with the eagerness of yesterday, he lowered his head and was about to kiss her. The monthly votes were rising happily. I don't need to say anything. I just love you, I just love you, I just love you. 4M. Chapter 1183. But this was a hospital where people came and went. Even though the corner was out of Jean Wan's and Kay's sight, there were still doctors and nurses walking back and forth nearby. Fong Ling raised her hand and covered the man's mouth that was about to kiss her. She hinted at him with her eyes to restrain himself. However, the man just held her like this, tilted his head and looked down at her with a smile. He did not force himself to kiss her but gently kissed her palm. Under the man's seductive and meaningful gaze, Fong Ling felt that the part of her palm that was touched by his lips was frighteningly hot. She hurriedly put her hands down and stood by the wall. At the same time, she glanced sideways at the corner, only to find that Mr. Mo's father had come out of another elevator with Secretarian, and Jean Wan had bumped into them. Mr. Mo hadn't recovered from his injury yet, but Shu Yen was brought here so blatantly by Director Mo. It seemed that Director Mo didn't care about Jean Wan's feelings at all. Director Mo is here. I'll go back to wash my face and help Mrs. Mo. Fong Ling gave Li Nanheng a look, meaning for him to stop teasing Jean Wan and try to help her as much as possible, so as not to be taken advantage of by Director Mo. Me? Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and also glanced in that direction. Do you think she is as calm and docile as she looks? Jean Wan is even more stubborn than me. Why would she need my help? I don't care. If you're my man, you have to help my friend. Jean Wan said that I'm her friend. Li Nanheng's eyes instantly brightened. He lowered his eyes to look at Fong Ling, who had just blurted out those words. Man? All right, I'll help. The man immediately smiled happily. Fong Ling. She fled. Seeing that Fong Ling was really in a hurry to go back to wash her face, Li Nanheng did not stop her. He casually picked up a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Recalling the expression on Fong Ling's face when she said he was her man, he immediately smiled, looked back at Jean Wan, and walked over with the unlit cigarette in his mouth without lighting it. Since his wife asked him to help, he would help. Outside Mo Jingshan's ward, and Shu Yan was carrying some nutrition products and a fruit basket. She had just walked over when she was stopped by Li Nanheng. He glanced at her coldly. "Missin, are you here to visit on behalf of Director Mo?" Seeing that it was Li Nanheng, and Shu Yan retracted her arrogant expression and nodded politely. "Yes, Director Mo asked me to visit Jingshan." Li Nanheng put on a fake smile, but his smile was obviously cold. His tall and straight figure still blocked the door of the ward, and he said coldly, "He is resting. It's really inconvenient for Missin to go in like this. If you need any condolences or instructions, just tell Mrs. Mo. She will help you convey them." Standing on the elevator side, Jean Wan heard his words and silently gave Li Nanheng a thumbs up in her heart. She didn't expect that Nanheng, who usually disliked her and always wanted to argue with her, would be so reliable when it was time to help her. "Mr. Li, Director Mo is there. He should have heard what I said just now," and Shu Yan emphasized. Li Nanheng took the cigarette out of his mouth and said coldly, "I've been friends with Mo Jingshan for many years, but I have nothing to do with Shine Group. Chairman Mo, you should know my temper. I'm afraid that unrelated people won't be able to break into my place." As he said this, Li Nanheng glanced coldly at Director Mo with a faint smile. Hearing this, Mo Shaoza was obviously a little unhappy, but he had to admit that this hospital was surrounded by people from 11 base. If he hadn't been able to get in because he was Mo Jingshan's father, it would have been difficult for him to get to this floor. "My own son is hospitalized here. As a father, I just want to see him. Why should I be stopped by you?" Mo Shaoza asked coldly, his eyes unkind and unhappy. "If Director Mo wants to go in, of course, I won't stop you." Li Nanheng's tone was unhurried and cold. "But I'm afraid it's not appropriate for Missin to go in. Mrs. Mo is still watching here. If you let Missin in, are you sure you're not joking, Director Mo?" Mo Shaoza frowned coldly, but Shu Yan was a little embarrassed by Li Nanheng's words. In the end, she couldn't put down her pride and walked to Jean Wan's side, handing her something in her hand. "Mrs. Mo, sorry to trouble you." Seeing that Jean Wan could deal with the situation alone without offending the elders, Li Nanheng didn't say anything more and left. He had to go back to the Li family because he hadn't finished dealing with the outside affairs, but before he went back, he could take a look at his little wife who had just admitted that he was her man. Fong Ling had just washed her face in the break room and was wiping away the water stains on her face. She didn't really use any skincare products, but the cream she bought for Jean Wan yesterday smelled very good. It was a very, very light fragrance. Jean Wan said that no matter how expensive it was, in the end, it only had the most practical moisturizing effect. Fong Ling glanced at it, picked it up, dipped a little with her finger, applied it to her face, and then patted it off bit by bit. She had to thank Ling Feifei back in Tea City for learning how to apply skincare products. If it weren't for the fact that Ling Feifei would stand in the dormitory for a long time to apply skincare products after washing her face every morning and night, she wouldn't have been taught to the point where she could even use skincare products. After applying a thin layer, she felt that her usually fair but slightly dry skin looked moist and smooth to the touch. No wonder women like to use skincare products. She patted her face and considered whether to buy a few bottles for herself. She was definitely embarrassed to use Jean Wan's, even if Jean Wan was willing to let her use it. As she was thinking, the door of the break room suddenly opened. Knowing that she lived alone, Li Nanheng didn't knock on the door when he entered, but as soon as he came in, he saw that Fong Ling was still standing in front of a small mirror on the wall of the break room, poking her own face with her own finger. Fong Ling, the best sniper of 11 base, who had always been handsome, was hiding in the room acting cute. With just a glance, Li Nanheng's heart almost melted. He walked over, grabbed Fong Ling's wrist, and decisively pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and continued what he hadn't finished outside just now. He kissed her hard on the lips. Dissatisfied with the kiss, he swept his tongue across her lips, forced her lips open, and kissed her deeper. Chapter 1184. Fong Ling paused because of his sudden estrus. Thinking of how hard he had been suppressing his desire yesterday, she guessed that it would not be so easy to extinguish today. Besides, there was no one else here, so she did not struggle. She allowed the man to hug and kiss her for a long time. During this time, Fong Ling carefully tried to respond. She wasn't good at responding, but she felt that it wasn't good for her to be moved like this. She moved her lips and mimicked his movements to kiss and suck his tongue. The man seemed to have been stimulated. He held her tightly in his arms and bit her lips deeply and heavily for a long time. If it weren't for the fact that he had something important to do, Fong Ling felt that this man would directly touch her again. From this kiss full of hot desire, she could feel how hard it was for him to hold back. In the end, he forcibly restrained himself, but at the same time, he held her waist, bent down to kiss her ear, and said while kissing her earlobe, "Don't just care about taking care of Jean Wan and Mo Jingshan all day. The employer-bodyguard relationship between you and Jean Wan is basically about to expire. In a few days, you will still be mine. You will also be Jean Wan's friend. Pay attention to your rest, and don't work too hard." Was it about to expire? Fong Ling had always thought that after this matter was over, she would continue to accompany Jean Wan back to High City. She didn't know what this so-called expiration was. When she first went there, it was Dr. Qin who introduced her. Later, it seemed that Xiao Su took her to the Yu Garden to see Jean Wan and to meet Mr. Mo. However, at that time, she didn't pay much attention to the contract. She only knew that it was not a lifelong contract. At that time, Xiao Su did say that she should live in the sea for a few months as a way to relax. A few months. It actually expired just like that. But it didn't matter. Right now, her relationship with Jean Wan was very good. Even if she was not an employer and bodyguard, in the future, they would still be friends. In many ways, in her heart, she was definitely still on Jean Wan's side because Jean Wan was good to her. After the contract with the bodyguard in High City expires, what do you think? The man's words suddenly fell on her ears. Fong Ling, I haven't thought about this problem. Stay by my side? If it was in the past, she would definitely run as far as she could. But now, she had already decided to follow her heart. In this relationship, she didn't want to be passive all the time. She couldn't always enjoy Li Nanheng's kindness to her. When it was time to express her feelings, she couldn't hide them anymore. Since they had feelings, she should be more honest. She pondered for a moment before saying, "I don't have any plans for now, so I'll stay here for now. We'll talk about it when the contract expires. Even if I only have 1 day left, I'm still her bodyguard." Sure. Knowing her stubbornness, Li Nanheng didn't ask any more questions. He smiled and raised his hand to touch the little knot on her head. Now that she could gradually stop retreating and take the initiative to take a step forward, even if it was just half a step, it was enough for him. Fong Ling couldn't help but raise her hand to untie the little thing on her head. However, the man fondled it fondly for a long time and slapped away her hand that was about to lift up to untie it. After fondling it for a long time and playing with it for a long time, his phone rang. The man raised his eyebrows, picked up his phone, looked at the caller ID, and turned to walk out. "All right, I'll go back to the Li family first." Fong Ling responded simply. After the man left, she turned to look at the small mirror on the wall for a while and raised her hand to touch the bangs on her head. Thinking of Li Nanheng's fondness for it just now, she strangely felt that her face was getting hotter and hotter. She felt a little uncomfortable standing there and quickly untied the little knot on her head. Then she looked at the little black rubber band in her hand, but she couldn't bear to throw it away. She turned back and put it on the drawer by the bed. In the past few days when Fong Ling was in the hospital, Li Nanheng really didn't have time to idle. As time went by, the two of them didn't have a chance to talk to each other for about a week. Every time they met in the hospital, they only glanced at each other. In the end, Li Nanheng couldn't bear it anymore. While he was busy in the base, he told Ah Feng a few words. Ah Feng received the order and didn't dare to disobey. So Feng Ling had just accompanied Jin Wan in the hospital and applied medicine for the burn on her hand. As soon as she returned to the lounge, she received a courier. She had never received a courier before. When she took the courier back, she opened it and saw that it was an application document that 11 Base had specially arranged for her. This time, in addition to the application document, there was also a position arrangement in the base. 11 Base hadn't recruited new people for almost 3 years. The old people who passed the assessment were arranged to work in the military, the police, and the security department of the United Nations in batches, and the old people left in the base also had their own duties in the base. Drill masters like Han Jin, who was qualified to teach old people, didn't directly teach new people. Now his position in the base was similar to that of Ah Feng, and he was in charge of the base hall. Now the base lacked drill masters, especially drill masters who trained new people. The base now recruited 2 teams of newcomers, each team of 20 people. One of the teams was led by a former member of Team 2 who had a good performance in the assessment, and the other team, they planned to let Feng Ling go back to lead. What he meant was to give Feng Ling a chance to remember her original intentions while applying for the job. When she was in the base, she also came out from Team 1, Team 2, and Team 3 in the same way. In the past, she refused to accept the so-called shooting instructor training method, but if it was to teach newcomers, the possibility of her accepting it was slightly higher. Sure enough, looking at the documents, Feng Ling hesitated and didn't directly refuse. If she went back, she would tacitly agree to return to the base. And she knew most of the situation in the base, and the information written in the documents was true. Now it was really difficult to find a suitable drill master. She could find any one of the previous drill masters, but she wanted to make good achievements in all aspects, not lose the face of the base in front of the new people, and really lay a good foundation for the new people. Feng Ling was quite confident in this point. Since the contract between her and Mrs. Mo was coming to an end, she didn't know where to go for the time being, and since she had chosen Li Nanheng, Feng Ling looked at the documents in her hand for a while, picked up her cell phone, and called the base hall. The call was answered by Ah Feng. She didn't say too much and said directly, "I agree to be the drill master, but I'd better keep a low profile when I return to the base. Don't let those people in Team 3 complain about me. After all, I've been away for so long, and I don't want to cause any trouble." Chapter 1185. Ah Feng didn't expect that Feng Ling would agree so quickly this time and easily completed the task assigned by boss. He was secretly delighted. Okay, let's keep a low profile. As long as you come back, everything will be fine." Ah Feng was usually a very serious person, especially when he was assigned to the base by the elders of the Li family to be responsible for managing various things, which was equivalent to the eyes of the elders of the Li family. However, he was quite loyal. She remembered that when she was driven out of the base, Feng saw it from the side. He obviously couldn't bear to see her like this, but after all, he had his duty and rules, so he didn't say anything to her face. Feng Ling was more or less infected by such an honest and serious person's happy tone, and she also felt as if she had inadvertently let go of the past things. It was also good to go back like this. The identity of a newcomer drill master was not as noble as that of an official shooting drill master in the base. Those who still criticized her in the base would be more accepted, so that she could avoid a lot of gossip and trouble. On the day Jin Wan and Mr. Mo were discharged from the hospital, they went to 11 base first. Mr. Mo had something to discuss at the base. It was rare for him to come to the base in person, so many people went to the conference room. Feng Ling accompanied Jin Wan to walk around the base. Kay would occasionally come over to explain the various places and facilities of the base to Jin Wan. After visiting the shooting training ground and some training areas for close combat, Jin Wan looked at the members who still insisted on training for several hours in such cold weather and turned to look at Feng Ling. "Did you do this every day?" Fong Ling glanced over and nodded. Mrs. Imo, don't be fooled by Fong Ling's small body. Every time we train, she's better than us. When we fight, she's always the first one. Let's not talk about sniper rifles. In terms of close combat, 80% of the people in our base can't beat her. Kay said and put his arm around Fong Ling's shoulder as if they were brothers. Fong Ling didn't avoid him but said coldly, I refuse to be flattered. Kay smiled. What? Are you afraid that Mrs. Imo will know your position in our base? You want to raise her salary? Alas, it's not that Mrs. Imo can't afford it. The news that Fong Ling was going back to the base had been spread among these people. Everyone was happy and waited for her to come back. Get lost. Fong Ling raised her hand and slapped him away. I'll accompany her for a while. Why is a man following her? I don't think I can have a private conversation with Mrs. Imo. Last time, when she put on a facial mask, it was so embarrassing that I almost smashed my phone. Before Kay finished his words, Fong Ling raised her foot to kick him. He nimbly dodged and ran away. Afterward, Jean Wan watched the figures who were training. Perhaps even women had some heroism in their bones. Even if they did not receive training from a young age, they still wanted to learn as much as they could. Thus, Jean Wan asked Fong Ling to teach her how to shoot. Fong Ling happened to be free. If Jean Wan could learn some simple self-defense skills or teach her how to shoot safely without accidentally firing, she would certainly be happy to teach her. After all, last time in Cambodia, although Jean Wan had fired a gun, she didn't know how to use it and almost hurt herself. It was a good time to teach him now. In fact, if Fong Ling hadn't promised the base that she would come back, when Jean Wan said she wanted to stay by her side to teach her some martial arts, Fong Ling would have been a little shaken and didn't want to be separated from Jean Wan. But everyone had their own path to walk. Sooner or later, Jean Wan would return to High City with Mr. Imo, and she didn't belong to High City. Behind her was 11 base, and the man she loved was Li Nanheng. She couldn't cut him off, nor could she give him up. The next day, Mr. Imo and Jean Wan returned to the Mo family in Los Angeles. Fong Ling didn't need to follow them, so she had nothing to do. Fong didn't think so. Seeing Mr. and Mrs. Mo leave, he hurriedly came to Fong Ling with the list of the new members of the base, fearing that she would regret it and run away again. This is the list of the new members of the team arranged for you. These members are older than when you first joined the team, but they are only 18 or 19 years old. Now the base is not allowed to recruit children under the age of 16. Even if they want to join, they have to wait until they are old enough. The opportunity to sneak in at the age of 13 has completely disappeared. Hearing this, Fong Ling picked up the list and glanced at it. They were indeed all 18 or 19 years old. In fact, they were not much younger than her. She was only 21 years old now. Mrs. Fong meant that she was now 21 years old. But she was only half a year older than her previous age and birthday, so there wasn't much difference between them. But the newcomers at this age are easier to train. Although they are also troublesome, at least they can understand and abide by the rules, unlike the young ones. Occasionally, we have to take care of their emotions. At this age, we don't need to take care of them. If they make a mistake, we can punish them directly. If they can't hold on, we can kick them out. In the base, psychological strength is more important. Okay. Fong Ling responded mildly. As she looked at the list, she asked, "Who's the one who suddenly arranged such a job for me?" She didn't expect that she would suddenly ask this question. Fong directly said what he had prepared before. Of course, it's the base hall's idea. Now the leadership is so short of manpower. These elite members were accidentally lost outside. Now that we finally have a chance to bring them back, we must try our best to bring them back. Really? He couldn't wait for her to stay in the base every day and stay by his side. She didn't say anything but smiled lightly. All right, I'll take these people. But I just came back and haven't trained for a long time. I have to review many basic movements and postures. Give me 3 days to recover. I'll go see these people. Li Nanheng nodded. Okay, I'll take them back. But I just came back and haven't trained for a long time. I have to review many basic movements and postures. Okay, 3 days is fine. After Ah Feng left, Feng Ling stood in the conference room of the base, turned around, and walked out of the door. She looked at the large training grounds and the assembly square in the middle of the base. She could vaguely hear the uniform footsteps of a team of players training. She breathed in the familiar air here and smiled. Bahaha, I'm back. It means that the little lamb has returned to the wolf's cave. Haha, I beg for monthly votes. Chapter 1186. Although Feng Ling was back, she was no longer a member of the sniper team. This time, she came back with a new identity and responsibilities, so she couldn't live there temporarily. Li Nanheng was the only one living in the entire building. In the room next to his, Li Nanheng was the only one living in the room. In the room next to his, Feng Ling came back as a woman, so she couldn't live next to Li Nanheng so openly. Even though most people in the base had a tacit understanding about many things, in order not to affect the atmosphere of the base, Feng Ling still had to move out. 2 days later, there was still 1 day before Feng Ling officially took over the newcomers. Li Nanheng happened to be busy with those tricky things today and returned to the base, but he still had business to talk about in the base hall. On the way back, he learned that Feng Ling had settled down in the base these days and didn't intend to leave again. He was very relieved about Feng Ling's current state. Although he missed her very much, he still went to the hall to talk about the military affairs first. As soon as Li Nanheng's car stopped in front of the hall, he got out of the car and was about to walk in when he suddenly heard something. He turned back and saw that Feng Ling had come from some direction. She was carrying 2 large suitcases in her hands and was huffing and puffing as she dragged the suitcases to the door of the hall. Seeing Feng Ling's suitcases, he knew they were definitely not light. Li Nanheng walked down and took the suitcases for her. What's this? Feng Ling didn't expect him to suddenly come back. She suddenly raised her eyes to see the man and was stunned. Then she saw the man's effortless expression as he helped her carry the suitcases, and she secretly thought, sure enough, men and women are still somewhat different. No matter how agile she was, in terms of strength, if the full score was 100, Li Nanheng could give her 150 points. As for herself, no matter how long she trained, she could at most give her 70 or 80 points in her best state. The biggest difference between men and women was the disparity in strength. Ah Feng said he arranged for me to live in the base hall for the time being. There is a room on the corner of the 2nd floor of the base hall. He asked me to live in it, Feng Ling said as she reached out to help him. As soon as Li Nanheng heard this, he didn't lift the suitcase anymore. He put the suitcase back on the ground and said angrily, "You live in the base hall?" "Yes, what else?" Feng Ling glanced at the suitcase that he had thrown away and then looked up at him. "Since I am the drill master of the newbies, I must live in the place closest to the newbies, but because of my gender, it is not convenient for me to live in the same building as them. The base hall is the closest place to the training ground for the newbies, and the brothers in the sniper team have already moved to their new residence. If I don't live here, where else can I live?" Li Nanheng glanced at her coldly. "You can't stay there." Feng heard the sound of the car just now and knew that Boss Li was back, but he didn't see him for a while, so he subconsciously came out to see the situation, only to hear Li Nanheng's cold words. Feng cleared his throat, pretended to cough, and said, "Boss, although this base is yours, 95% of the brothers in our base are single, and the remaining 5% who have girlfriends can't see each other for months. You'd better restrain yourself in the base. Isn't it too much to let Feng Ling live in your place?" Li Nanheng glanced at him coldly. "I'm talking about my neighbor. What are you thinking? You can't live next door either. There is only a wall between us, and now you live alone in that building. There is no one else. Ah, Feng said with a smile. In the past, everyone thought Feng Ling was a man. Now everyone basically knows what happened between you and her. What's the difference between you and her? What's the difference between living in the same building and sleeping in the same bed? Feng Ling, you are the boss. Even if you have the final say here, you still have to take everyone's feelings into consideration. In private, in a place where no one can see or feel, you and Feng Ling can do whatever you want, but I still say, don't go too far on the surface. With that, Feng looked at Feng Ling and winked at her, meaning for her to understand. Now we can only live here for the time being. Don't be picky. Feng Ling, we don't have to mess around. It's good to live in the base hall. This is the best place in the base in terms of view and environment. How can I be picky? Li Nanheng's face darkened. Of course, the base hall was good. Of course, the view and environment were good. It was so good that whenever he wanted to come to find Feng Ling at night and do something that wouldn't irritate the singles in the base, he had to walk under the surveillance cameras at the main entrance of the base hall. There were many surveillance cameras around here, including all the corridors inside, and there were many people coming and going here. It was the highest position in the middle of the base. Why did he try so hard to coax Feng Ling back to the base? Just to see her but not to eat her? What the hell was he trying to do? As the boss of the base, Li Nanheng was the boss of everyone here and their boss. Every time they went out on a mission, he would pay for the large amount of mission subsidies and bonuses. Even if he was so generous that no one could gossip about him, after all, the base was full of single dogs, and Feng Ling was indeed the only woman who was allowed to stay. This rule of the base had just been broken. If he did other things too openly, it would make things difficult for her. It's fine if you don't live in my place. Just move to another place. Li Nanheng's face was dark. Isn't there a newly built single-family building next to the training building for the newcomers? Ah, Feng curled his lips. That building has only been built for a few months, and the facilities in it haven't been set up yet. The water and electricity haven't been set up yet, including various bedding facilities and daily necessities. I was busy with other things in the past few months, so I didn't pay attention to these newly built single-family buildings in the base. Even if you want Feng Ling to move in, you have to at least get these things done. Putting aside the time it will take for her to live in it, it will be at least 3 months later. She still has to live here for the next 3 months. Hearing this, Feng Ling didn't want to waste any more time, so she said, "It's okay. I'll live here. It's really good, W. 4M." Chapter 1187. Damn it. Li Nanheng cursed in his heart but said coldly and expressionlessly, "Are you sure you want to live here?" "Yes." Feng Ling nodded. The next moment, he suddenly received a cold look from Li Nanheng. Ah Feng stood straight in front of the base hall and said very professionally, "Although you are the boss, I still have the final say in the various backup matters in the base. Boss, no matter how unhappy you are, you have to hold it in. Speaking of this, in order to live a better life in the base in the future and not be troubled by Boss Li every day," Ah Feng hurriedly added, "even if you really can't help but want to do something with Feng Ling, you're the boss after all. You can leave the base at any time. After taking her out of the base, you can do whatever you want to her. Just be careful. Don't let Feng Ling come back the next day to train the new members." Ah Feng nodded. Feng Ling, she couldn't bear it anymore. She endured it and went forward to pick up the suitcase. "I'll move in first. I just packed a lot of things in the original residence that I didn't take away before. There are a lot of things in these 2 suitcases. I have to clean them up for a while. No wonder there seemed to be so many things. There were more things than when she left the base." Li Nanheng cursed in his heart and his face was full of displeasure, but now Feng Ling was willing to stay here, which was already the biggest concession she had made recently. In order to avoid being entangled in public opinion in the base, he had to be careful. Feng Ling was about to lift the suitcase, but in the next moment, her hands suddenly became light. Li Nanheng, who was full of the words, "I am very unhappy now," walked up the stairs in front of the base hall with her suitcase, and when passing by Ah Feng, he said coldly, "Which room? Lead the way." Ah Feng knew that now was not the time to provoke Boss. While Boss Li was still rational, at least in front of Feng Ling, he hurriedly stepped forward to lead the way. Feng Ling walked behind, saw the two men, one in front and one behind, and then saw Li Nanheng's back as he helped her carry the suitcase in. She watched as he carried the heavy object without affecting his steady pace. Even though he was wearing a uniform, under the black sleeves, she could still vaguely see the muscle lines on the man's arms. And, was this the so-called boyfriend power? At this moment, she only felt that her heart was full of. He went upstairs and walked to his room on the second floor of the base hall. After entering the room, Feng Ling found that it was a completely different world. It turned out to be a business suite with good conditions in a hotel. There were new bed sheets, new carpets, and even the curtains had been changed. It was clean and tidy, almost the same as the one Li Nanheng lived in alone. No matter how good the conditions in the base were, this was, after all, a military training base. There was not much space for enjoyment, so even the best rooms were very simple. Feng Ling was really satisfied to have such a room of about 70 to 80 square meters for herself to live in. Moreover, whether it was the separate bathroom, study, or bedroom, the design was very thoughtful. Looking at the facilities in this room, according to the conditions of the base, Feng Ling was treated well. Li Nanheng's anger subsided a little, but only a little. The man's eyes were still a little unhappy. "Feng Ling, you can live here in the future. As for the newcomers, if you plan to move over after a period of time, wait for the new building to be cleaned up, and I will find someone to redecorate the room for you. I'm not a little girl who grew up in a princess's room. I've even slept in the mud trenches with the brothers in the base. I don't need this much," Feng Ling said as she looked out of the window. "You specially arranged a room with a balcony for me. From here, I can see the training team of the newbies and many important places in the base. The view is really good. This place is big enough. If it won't affect your work here, I can live here all the time," Feng Ling said and looked out of the window. "You specially arranged a room with a balcony for me. From here, I can see the training team of the newbies and many important places in the base. Just one bed?" Boss Li, who was expressionless, had gone to the bedroom and glanced around. He found that although the space here was big enough, there was only one bed in the bedroom, and another room that could be used as a bedroom was set aside. Obviously, it was to be used as a utility room for Feng Ling. Ah Feng, Feng Ling, the two of them were politely discussing where to live here, but Boss Li went to study how many beds there were here. Ah Feng looked back and said, "Well, I'll ask someone to bring in another bed." Feng Ling just wanted to say no. She usually lived here alone. Why would she need a bed? Besides, this was the base hall, and there were so many pairs of eyes watching her. Li Nanheng couldn't really come here every day. However, Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows slightly. "No, one bed is good, very good." Ah Feng immediately understood. He coughed and couldn't help reminding him, "Boss, this is the base after all. Don't go too far." Li Nanheng glanced at him coldly. Being stared at coldly, Ah Feng's hair stood on end, and he hurriedly said, "No, no, no, boss, you can do whatever you want. I've checked it. The soundproofing here is not bad. As long as boss doesn't come here when there are many people, there shouldn't be any problem." Li Nanheng didn't speak anymore but took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Although he didn't say anything, his eyes and actions were clearly hinting to Ah Feng that he was redundant here now. Ah Feng immediately understood Boss Li's meaning from his cold eyes. He quickly turned back and said something to Feng Ling, and quickly walked out. When he reached the door, he thought for a while and still wanted to remind Boss Li that there was not even a condom here. Feng Ling was still a drill master, and she was still young. He didn't want her to get pregnant in the base. However, on second thought, she remembered that the Li family's grandfather was worried that Feng Ling had returned to the base because she was a woman. At the same time, he was also looking forward to holding a great-grandson. She felt that there was no need for her to say anything more. Feng hesitated in front of the door for more than 10 seconds, and suddenly felt a gaze from inside the door. He immediately felt a thorn in his back and quickly and decisively closed the door. Before Li Nanheng withdrew his gaze, Feng Ling went to open her suitcase and took out her things one by one. There were a lot of things she used to use in the base, but she didn't take them away in recent years. W. 4M. Chapter 1188. Seeing her tidying up happily, Li Nanheng took a look at her suitcase. Most of her personal belongings were in her suitcase. She tidied up first, and he turned into the bathroom with an unlit cigarette in his mouth. He checked whether the water, electricity, faucet, and water heater were working well. After making sure everything was fine, he came out. When he came out, Feng Ling had already hung her clothes in the small cloakroom. Although the cloakroom was not big and was separate, it was much larger than an ordinary wardrobe. Feng Ling didn't have many clothes, and the uniforms she wore here a few years ago could no longer be worn. The base would change to a new style of uniform every year, and her clothes needed to be customized. The rest were her own clothes. Most of them were sportswear, and there were loose short-sleeved or long-sleeved t-shirts, casual pants, jeans, sports pants, and all kinds of flat shoes, sneakers, or boots that she was used to wearing many years ago. But she didn't have a skirt or high heels. Everyone was used to the way she dressed over the years. If she really came out in a skirt and high heels one day, she would probably scare a lot of people like that day when she put on a mask. She was very beautiful but would still scare a lot of people. When he saw that she even brought back the red scarf he bought in the food city that was only worth a few dozen yuan, Li Nanheng's depressed mood because she couldn't live next to him was instantly swept away. The man took the cigarette out of his mouth, clamped it between his fingers, and walked over. If there's anything else you need, just tell Feng. You've heard it. He's in charge of everything inside and outside the base. Don't worry about him. If you need anything, just go to him. Feng Ling took out the red scarf from the suitcase, carefully folded it, got up, walked to the cloakroom, and put it in the small cabinet inside. Then she looked back at the man who was still unwilling to give up. She walked back. You've taken out the cigarette for a long time. Why didn't you smoke it? I want to quit, but I haven't, the man said lightly and looked at her. You've just moved into this place. Even if I want to smoke, I have to go out to smoke. I can't leave secondhand smoke here. Feng Ling, when did you treat me like an outsider? You used to smoke a lot in front of me. The man suddenly sneered, as if it was because she said the word outsider. When Feng Ling was about to take more things from the suitcase, a pair of hands suddenly reached out from behind and pulled her into his arms. She paused, and before she spoke, the man bent down to press her into his arms. Even though she leaned against him, he still bent down to kiss her ear and said hoarsely, "You mean that I don't need to treat you as an outsider in the future? I can do whatever I want to you. From body to heart, from top to bottom, inside to outside, you are all mine." Feng Ling couldn't help shrinking her neck. She was trying her best to adapt to the atmosphere of making love and trying not to be the passive one, but when she was about to pack her luggage, the man suddenly became hot. She quickly shrank her neck to avoid his hot breath and said, Don't mess around. I'll pack my things." "What are you packing?" "These are the things you didn't plan to take with you when you left. Now you want to pack them up." The man held her and didn't let go. His voice was close to her ear. "I didn't know you were so sentimental. Why can't I cherish the past?" Seeing that she couldn't break free, Feng Ling gave up and let the man hold her from behind. She turned to look outside the balcony. Although she knew that no one could see them, she still blushed a little. Why can't I cherish the past? Feng Ling saw that she couldn't break free and simply let the man hold her from behind. This was in the base. In the past, she had always been passive in the base, and at that time, her identity had never been exposed. Everything was still a blur. Now that it was all laid out on the table, such intimacy, although she did faintly like it in her heart, she still blushed. In the past, Feng Ling had never thought that she would often blush, but she found that she was often teased by this man, and sometimes she was really caught off guard. It's good to be sentimental. The man held her in his arms, and as he hugged her, he turned her body around so that she was in his arms. The fire in his eyes rose. I'll take you to make up for the training that the sniper team lacks. You only lacked the second half of the training back then, and you've already grasped the basic essentials. There's no problem, but you have to make up for what you haven't learned. You can't leave any regrets. Feng Ling didn't expect that she would have a chance to go to the sniper team to make up for the remaining training. Her eyes lit up. Really? When have I ever lied to you? Seeing her bright eyes, the man's lips were also full of smiles. The cigarette had long been thrown away, and he only hugged her tightly in his arms. Do you think that I called you back just to be an instructor for the newbies? There are more good things waiting for you. That's right. What else? Kiss me. Kiss me and I'll tell you. The man moved his chin toward her mouth. Feng Ling watched him move his chin closer and saw the triumphant smile in the man's eyes. She instinctively shrank her head back. Seeing her shrink back, Li Nanheng frowned unhappily. Didn't you say you wanted to date me and officially be my woman last time? Why are you shrinking back? Feng Ling, she was slightly embarrassed, but looking at his chin, she knew that it didn't matter if it was a good thing or not. She didn't have to know. Anyway, the base had its own arrangements. Li Nanheng would consider everything he did and wouldn't be as shameless as he was in front of her. In front of others, he was the cold, strict, and terrifying Boss Li. He wouldn't really mess around. However, looking at the man's chin, which he hadn't taken care of because he had been too busy these past few days, and seeing the green stubble, she blinked and looked at his expression. In the end, she leaned forward and kissed his chin. After kissing him, the man deliberately hugged her tightly and lowered his head to rub his chin against her face. Feng Ling grunted and struggled. In the end, the man pressed her into the sofa and Feng Ling pushed him hard. Don't. Get up, it hurts. The man didn't intend to do anything, but hearing her cry of pain, he immediately felt something was wrong. He took a deep breath, resisted the urge, and looked down at her. What hurts? Feng Ling looked at the stubble on his chin speechlessly. You're so prickly, W. 4M. Chapter 1189. Is it very prickly? Hearing this, Li Nanheng raised his hand to touch his chin. After touching it, he suddenly smiled maliciously and continued to hold her and rub against the sofa. Feng Ling's body softened and she almost had no strength to resist. He lowered his head and deliberately rubbed his chin against her cheek. Try again. Do you still want to prick me? Feng Ling hurriedly moved away in pain, but because the man was holding her, she couldn't avoid it. Just when she was blushing, the man suddenly raised his wrist to look at the time, then let out a long breath, got down from under her, and sat upright on the sofa. Feng Ling also quickly sat up. She didn't feel anything before, but now that she had just returned to the base, she was suddenly touched by this man here. It would be a lie to say that her heart wasn't pounding. After all, Feng Ling was a living person. No matter how hard she tried to suppress her temper and nature, she still felt her scalp tingling just thinking about it. She still felt her skin and flesh tense all over and her body was burning hot. Feng Ling, after all, was a living person. She was used to living since she was young. Even though she had suppressed her temper and nature, she still felt her scalp tingling just thinking about it. Li Nanheng said, "All right, I won't bully you anymore. Just live here. It's not inconvenient. I can find a way to avoid those people who get in the way." Feng Ling was stunned. Hearing his tone, she could tell that he was going to let it go. It was a foregone conclusion that she would live here, but just now, this man still refused to leave. She thought he wanted to do something after driving off Feng out. After all, he had been holding back for so long. Feng Ling only felt that the place on her cheek that was deliberately rubbed by his stubble was still a little painful. The pain was not really very painful, but as if something thin and dense was drilling into her heart through her pores. She sat upright on the sofa with the man at the same time, and her voice couldn't be any softer. In fact, I can also let you bully me. Li Nanheng's eyelids suddenly twitched and he turned to look at the woman sitting next to him. She didn't know how to express her feelings, but she wanted to take the initiative to say something, lest Nanheng thought she didn't like him. She liked him very much, but she seemed to be clumsy and could only say 1 or 2 words to express that she accepted him and liked him. Even if they returned to the base, she didn't have to keep a distance every day. As long as she was appropriate, she didn't say she had to make him a vegetarian monk. But when she said this, the man suddenly touched his forehead with a headache. What's wrong? Feng Ling thought she had said something wrong and turned to look at him. The blue veins on the man's forehead bulged, but he pressed it with his hand and said with a headache, "If you want to bully me, it's not the right time." Feng Ling paused again and was silent for a while before she remembered that he seemed to have just driven back from outside. The car was still parked in front of the base hall. He must have something to talk to someone in the base hall, but he suddenly saw her at the door and then focused his attention on her. What conversation or business he was going to have was delayed until now. Okay, I see. Then you go ahead. I still have time today to tidy up my room, Feng Ling said softly. Li Nanheng said, "Why didn't you speak to me in such a gentle voice before?" Feng Ling, is this gentle? She just didn't want to be cold to him anymore. Thinking of all the good things he had done for her, she instinctively softened her voice to express her understanding of him. It was well known that he was usually very busy in the base. It was not easy to be the boss of the base. Her voice was very gentle, which showed that she didn't get angry with him because of such a trivial matter. Okay. Hearing this, Feng Ling nodded. Then I'll try to be gentle in the future. Don't. Li Nanheng took his hand off his forehead and turned his eyes, which were bloodshot and slightly red. His voice was hoarse. If you continue to be gentle, I'm afraid I won't be able to take it. Feng Ling, she immediately withdrew her eyes from the man's and understood what he meant. She was so embarrassed that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. It was true that she couldn't help herself, but she also couldn't stand the man's undisguised words. Stop flirting with me. You can flirt with me as much as you want after I'm done with my work. If you continue like this, I'll be able to rush out of the king's morning court session and take you out of the base. I'll let you have fun every night for at least a year or so before coming back. Feng Ling didn't say anything. She knew that since Li Nanheng could say such words, it meant that he could really do it. If it weren't for the responsibility of the base, the Li family, and her feelings, this kind of thing might have played in his heart hundreds of times. I'm not flirting with you. Feng Ling wanted to stop the topic and ask him to hurry out and do his work. After saying this, she stood up and continued to tidy up her things. This time, the man didn't stop her. Instead, he watched her busy figure and rubbed his brows with a sigh and a smile. She didn't deliberately flirt with him. She didn't know that a woman who had been cold to him for many years, and a woman he had missed for many years, was the most precious thing in his heart. From being cold and not responding to him, to occasionally taking the initiative to approach him and speak softly. She was even very sensible and considerate. No man would be able to resist this, let alone Li Nanheng, who had finally found the most precious thing in his heart. Right now, he couldn't wait to not be a human. He wanted to strip her on the spot and kiss her hard from head to toe. At this time, he wanted her body and mind to belong to him completely. He wanted to take off his belt, tie it around her wrist, and tie her to the bed. He wanted her to be bullied by him and curl up in the corner of the bed, looking at him with red eyes and begging for mercy. He wanted to do more. What else did he want to do? Right now, he couldn't do it. His rationality was the last thing holding him together. If he continued to look like this, his last bit of reason would probably be gone. He glanced at the time again, got up, and left. When he walked out of the door, he forced himself not to look back. If he looked back, he would see that Fong Ling was standing by the bedroom door with a piece of folded clothes in her arms. She took the opportunity to sneak a peek at his back when he went out. If he had seen Fong Ling's sweet and reluctant gaze, he definitely wouldn't have been able to walk out of this door today. Chapter 1190. He knew that when Grandfather Li asked Ah Fong to come to the base, he couldn't agree. He handed over the power of these so-called chores to Ah Fong, so it was not so easy for Li Nanheng to enter Fong Ling's room again after leaving. In particular, during the meeting, it was mentioned several times that there were many newcomers in the base. The newcomers didn't know about the relationship between Boss Li and Fong Ling, nor did they know about the story of a woman disguised as a man. In order not to let those opportunistic girls who thought they could copy other people's methods sneak into the base in the future, the base didn't intend to disclose these things to the public. As for the newcomers, Ah Fong said, don't pollute the newcomers' understanding of the base. 11 Base is an absolutely serious military training base. Ah Fong gave an impassioned speech at the conference table, and even Han Jin and Xiao Su, who had been loyal to Li Nanheng for many years, couldn't help applauding and agreeing with this decision. Indeed, since Fong Ling had come back, they could see each other in the base every day. Boss should restrain himself. It was enough for him to meet people on the surface, but he shouldn't show off his affection all day long. In this way, those newcomers would be unbalanced. If they were unbalanced and unsteady in the early stage of the base, they would be easily eliminated. It was better to give those newcomers a good training environment. In the next few days, Li Nanheng inexplicably had a few spies around him. Even Han Jin and Xiao Su changed sides and kept an eye on him. If there was nothing serious, they wouldn't let Li Nanheng approach the base hall at will. Even when they went to the base cafeteria for lunch, Fong Ling was surrounded by a group of newcomers who had just taken over, and Li Nanheng couldn't even enter the door of the cafeteria. Xiao Su would order food for him on time every time before lunch, which was much more sumptuous than the food in the base cafeteria. He used various ways to stop Boss from showing off his affection to Fong Ling in front of the newcomers. Li Nanheng was angry. These bastards. After struggling for a few days, he found that Fong Ling had no intention of looking for him. Every day, she was surrounded by a group of 18 or 19-year-old boys, calling her the drill master, and drill master, and drill master, and drill master. There were even young boys who took advantage of the break to run behind her to massage her shoulders and back. At that time, Li Nanheng happened to pass by, and Xiao Su's teeth were chattering. He was afraid that Boss Li would shoot those newbies to death, so he quickly dragged them away, but after that day, Boss Li's face was gloomy for the whole day. What made him even more depressed was that the woman who sat beside him in the room a few days ago and said in a very soft and small voice that he could take advantage of her, had not contacted him in the past few days. Mentoring new people is really busy, but no matter how busy he is, he won't even return a call. The next afternoon, Li Nanheng passed by the newbie base again. Xiao Su and Ah Fong said that they didn't want Boss to scare the group of newbies, so they didn't let him go over. Moreover, they were still in the training period and it was not the time for the official assessment. Boss had to maintain a sense of mystery and shouldn't casually mix with the newbies, so they repeatedly stopped him from going over. This time, when he passed by, he saw the boy who ran behind Fong Ling to massage her shoulders and back last time pouring water into Fong Ling's cup. His smile was like the sunshine of a young man, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Obviously, he liked Fong Ling very much. Even the newbies were a group of half-grown children in Li Nanheng's eyes, but the youngest of these children was only 3 years younger than Fong Ling, and their ages were not much different from hers. In the evening, he finally found an opportunity to go to the canteen of the base, only to see that the boy had just helped Fong Ling get the food and put it in front of Fong Ling. Fong Ling even smiled at him. Although the smile was very polite, it was still a smile. She had always been serious, and it was said that she had been very strict in front of the newbies in recent days. Although she was a female drill master, these newbies were very afraid of her. But now she was smiling. Li Nanheng's temples throbbed. He didn't enter the canteen but pointed to the boy who was too eager. Where did this boy come from? Give me his information. Xiao Su felt that in just 3 or 4 days, the low pressure around Boss Li had become terrible, so he hurriedly colluded with Han Jin and asked him to think of a way. Otherwise, he felt that Boss Li would go to the newbies training team at any time. Han Jin obediently went to get the information. When he went to find Li Nanheng, he found that Boss was no longer in the canteen, but Feng Ling was still eating with the group of newbies in the canteen. Although Feng Ling didn't meet Boss Li often these days, he had to admit that in just 3 or 4 days, the group of brats under Feng Ling's command had become much more orderly and behaved in the base. They were no longer as messy as they were on the first day. It was said that on the first day, Feng Ling beat 2 particularly naughty boys to the ground on the spot, stepped on the backs of the 2 boys, and showed off her power in front of the 20 newbies expressionlessly. Who said that a female drill master was easy to bully? These newbies didn't know that in the entire base, even Boss Li didn't dare to mess with this female drill master. When Feng Ling was still training in the base, she had been serious and meticulous in her work. It was easy to imagine that those newcomers wouldn't be left casually. If any of them dared to be lazy, she could beat all 20 of them up within 15 minutes. Han Jin went to the building where Li Nanheng lived and found that Boss Li was not in the room, so he came out to look for him. Finally, he saw Boss Li, who hadn't practiced shooting for a long time, wasting more than a dozen bullets on the shooting range. Boss. Tell me, who is he? Li Nanheng continued to load the gun without looking back, his voice cold. Seeing Boss's somewhat mechanical and numb posture, he was probably going to burst out of jealousy after being ignored for 3 or 4 days. Han Jin coughed and handed him the information in his hand. He is just over 19 years old. His name is Wan Ku, and he has no background. He is an orphan. Hearing the word orphan, Li Nanheng suddenly stopped and turned to look at Han Jin. Chapter 1191. After all, Feng Ling was also an orphan. He grew up without parents and survived alone. When this boy first came to her, he was the one who wanted to transfer the most, because he felt that the base didn't value them and had eliminated them, Han Jin said with a smile. In the end, he was the first one to be beaten down by Feng Ling in less than 2 moves. That's right, Feng Ling was the first one to be beaten down by her in less than 2 moves. Han Jin smiled. Li Nanheng was expressionless. Very funny. Seeing Boss Li's jealous expression didn't diminish at all, Han Jin quickly stopped smiling. No, it's not funny at all. I'm just telling you what happened. Li Nanheng continued to raise the gun and his eyes were unkind. You need to rub my shoulders and wash my back. Han Jin's head hurt because of this jealousy, but he maintained an upright expression and said, yes, it's really too much. Li Nanheng didn't fire the gun in the end, but suddenly threw the gun heavily on the gun rack next to him and said coldly, newcomer, is he still a child at the age of 19? Yes, he's not a child anymore. He should be more careful. Han Jin echoed. Li Nanheng immediately glanced at him coldly. Being glanced at by Boss, Han Jin immediately felt a chill on his back and hurriedly smiled. Boss, in fact, you know Feng Ling's character. You've been chasing her for so long, but you haven't completely obeyed her yet, right? This little boy is just a flatterer. How can it be so easy to win her heart? Don't worry, it'll be fine. Why hadn't she completely obeyed him? A few days ago, she was still leaning in his arms so softly. That was definitely the Feng Ling these people had never seen before. Li Nanheng felt that Feng Ling's cold and heartless heart was now filled with some normal feelings. She was a little conscious of being in love. What if she was seduced by a young man 3 years younger than her before she seriously tried to work hard on him? What should she do? Although the possibility wasn't high, he definitely trusted Fong Ling. However, since that boy was an orphan, outstanding in all aspects, and his personality was so obvious, he knew how to provoke and flatter. It was hard to guarantee that Fong Ling wouldn't find someone with a particularly active personality more suitable for her. The more he thought about it, the gloomier his face became. In the end, he simply pulled down the zipper of his uniform, took off his coat, put it in his arm, and turned to leave. Seeing Boss Lee's expression, Han Jin had a hunch that even if Ah Fong had 10 lives, he wouldn't be able to stop him today. Tisk, I'd better keep my mouth shut. Ever since Fong Ling took over the entire team of newcomers, she had been so busy that her head was dizzy. Dealing with this group of newcomers had taken up all her energy. Every day, she had to wake up at 5:00 to arrange morning training. The key was that these newcomers had just come in, and the clock hadn't adjusted yet. There were often a few who were lazy in bed and didn't get up. She had to personally lift the quilt and dig them out of bed. At first, they were not used to it. They never thought that a female instructor would dare to lift their quilts. Although they were all wearing clothes, or at least a pair of pants, the young men who were 18 or 19 years old were still very embarrassed. After being lifted for 2 days, they consciously went to the training ground on time and did not dare to laze in bed anymore. It wasn't that Fong Ling didn't care about the difference between men and women, but because this was 11 base, and she had been in the base for many years, she wasn't very sensitive to this kind of behavior that didn't cross the boundary between men and women. Even if the age difference was not big, in her eyes, this group of newcomers were still children. She had considered this when she went to lift the quilt, but at most, she still needed some deterrence. Otherwise, if they could even be late for morning training, what could she expect from this group of people? Just like that, she lifted the quilt, supervised them coldly and strictly, and beat them up. After 3 or 4 days, the 20 hotheads all obediently submitted to her leather boots, not daring to make a sound of resistance. In addition to waking up early in the morning, her free time was also occupied by them. They asked all sorts of questions and tried to get close to her. Even though Fong Ling always put on a cold face, she was still a woman and a beautiful woman. In their eyes, she was the noble and elegant type. Except for training, they didn't dare to provoke her. In the rest of the time, they still wanted to flatter her and try to get close to her. Although most of them failed. Only the one named Wan Ku, when he first took over this group of people, he was the happiest, but now he was smiling mischievously in front of her all day long. Fong Ling understood his situation. In many aspects, he was quite similar to her back then, so she would occasionally smile kindly at him. However, her smile was usually very short. After smiling, she would ask him to hurry back to do what he was supposed to do and not hang around in front of her anymore. It was another day when she was busy from 5:00 in the morning to 9:30 in the evening. It was already dark. Fong Ling settled the affairs outside and went straight back to the base hall. At this time, there should be no one else in the base hall except for the few people on patrol. Who would have thought that just as she walked to the door of the hall, before her feet could even step on the stairs, a strong force would suddenly attack her from behind. She abruptly turned her eyes in surprise, and before she could see who it was, her wrist was suddenly grabbed. Before Fong Ling had time to say anything, the patrolling people in front of the base hall clearly saw the figures of Boss Lee and Fong Ling flash in front of them. After confirming that it was indeed Boss Lee, they thought about it and chose to pretend not to see it for the sake of their own lives and future in the base. They all had the same idea, so they all watched Fong Ling being forcibly taken away by Boss Lee, but they didn't say a word and even stood there calmly as if nothing had happened. 2 minutes later, Fong came out to take a look and looked at the time with a strange look. It's strange. The newbies are so difficult to deal with today. Why hasn't Fong Ling come back yet? However, at this moment, Fong Ling's mouth was covered by the man, and she couldn't make a sound even if she wanted to speak or call for help. She was forcibly taken to a dark place behind the base hall by the man. If she hadn't confirmed that the man was Li Nanheng from his familiar smell and the familiar arms on her back, she would have pulled out the gun from her waist. At this time, in the base, except for a few important places, most of the lights were off. In the open space behind the base hall, Feng Ling saw the darkness around her and her nerves all over instantly became much more sensitive. However, she was tired all day and didn't want to waste her strength to struggle. She also knew that Li Nanheng had been completely ignored by her these days. He must not be in a good mood, so she simply gave up struggling. She let the man hold her tightly in his arms in the dark and kissed her neck from behind. Chapter 1192. Feng Ling instantly trembled from the kiss, but at this moment, the man behind her hugged her even tighter. Because of the hot and wet kiss on her neck, even the tone of her voice changed when she spoke. "Boss, you still know that I'm your boss? I thought you didn't care about the entire base. You only stared at those brats every day." The man's voice came from her neck. When he spoke, his lips did not leave the skin behind her neck. When he spoke, the man's dry lips rubbed against her neck, making her itch and tremble. Feng Ling could not avoid it and could hear the dissatisfaction in the man's tone. She paused, touched the hand that was circling in front of her lower abdomen, slowly covered her hand, and was immediately held by the man. He rubbed her soft knuckles with his thumb and kissed her neck even more fiercely. If he continued kissing her, he was afraid that there would be some ambiguous marks left. She wore a combat uniform every day in the base, and the uniform was not a high-collared one. She couldn't wear something around her neck to cover those marks every day. She hurriedly elbowed his chest. When the man stopped and held her tighter, she leaned into his arms and whispered, "Be careful. This is the base after all. Even if it's dark, there may be people passing by at any time. There are so many people in the base. It's not easy to avoid people in this kind of place. You should restrain yourself." "Restrain myself?" The man hugged her tightly from behind, his voice against her ear, and he said hoarsely, "I tried everything I could to coax you back to the base. It wasn't easy for me to come back, but I was even further away from you. Those members surrounded you in the training camp all day. I didn't even have a chance to kiss or hug you, let alone relieve the heat. I finally caught you, and you still want me to restrain myself?" As the man spoke, he lowered his head to take a bite of the white, tender skin connecting her neck and shoulder. Of course, the bite was not harsh or painful, but it still caused Feng Ling to shiver all over instinctively. For a moment, she also softened, but she still looked around from time to time and secretly squeezed the man's hand. "I heard footsteps, so be it. Whoever dares to peek, I'll dig his eyes out tomorrow. Why didn't I realize that Li Nanheng was such a person?" Feng Ling hurriedly said, "Don't, I'm a drill master for newcomers, right? No matter what, those young boys are all very naughty. If I want to control them, I have to establish my authority in front of them. Right now, all of them think that I'm like a cold-faced female devil, and no one dares to offend me. In this way, they will listen to me and obediently train well. If they see me here with you, my newly established strict image will be completely destroyed." As she spoke, she quickly turned around in his arms and took the initiative to raise her hand to hold the man's face. She tiptoed and kissed his chin. After kissing him, she was afraid that passers-by would see her and quickly retreated. However, the man's eyes instantly darkened as he looked at her. The hand around her waist seemed to be able to pull her into his chest in an instant. There are really footsteps. Feng Ling subconsciously tilted her head to listen. Li Nanheng couldn't be bothered to care. He held her waist tightly, looked at her careful and serious expression, and then looked at her soft short hair sticking to her forehead. In the past, Feng Ling always deliberately cut her hair very short. Although she still had short hair, it was completely a woman's short hair type. Especially her hair was very soft, and when the wind gently blew, it would blow up some of her hair, making her look particularly soft and tranquil. With a warm and fragrant woman in his arms, and a woman who had clearly admitted that she was his girlfriend, any man couldn't help it. Besides, he had endured it for so many days. The man didn't say a word of nonsense and directly bent down to kiss her lips. Hearing the footsteps approaching, Feng Ling hurriedly raised her hand to cover the man's mouth. Li Nanheng immediately raised his eyebrows in displeasure and looked at her. She looked at him cautiously and begged, whispering, "Next time. Next time. This place is too close to the place where the newcomers live." Li Nanheng unhappily pulled her hand down and bent down to kiss her again. This time, Feng Ling didn't have time to dodge. Suddenly, two slightly familiar voices came from not far away. "Ah, there seems to be someone over there. Who is it?" Yes, why would someone come to the back of the base hall at this time? Hearing that it was the voices of the two newcomers in her team, Feng Ling suddenly felt as if there were thorns all over her body. She hurriedly stepped on Li Nanheng's foot hard. Li Nanheng was about to be affectionate with the little woman in front of him. Caught off guard, Li Nanheng was stepped on by her boot and glared at her with a livid face. Feng Ling hurriedly broke free from the man's arms. Before the two newcomers approached and could see who they were, she grabbed Li Nanheng's wrist hard, turned to the other side, and ran forward quickly. Li Nanheng resisted the urge to turn back and shoot the two newcomers, was dragged a few steps by Feng Ling, and the two returned to the door of the base hall. There were lights and surveillance cameras in front of the door. Feng Ling carefully took 2 deep breaths, still holding Li Nanheng's wrist, and then looked back in that direction, saying softly with a sigh of relief, "Fortunately, it was too dark over there. It should be impossible for them to recognize us. I know there are a few brats in our team who like to sneak out to smoke at night when everyone is asleep." Feng Ling was really strict with these newcomers. Even if they wanted to smoke, they were not allowed to smoke indoors, so when everyone returned to their residence at night, they could only sneak out to find an empty space to smoke for a while. As a result, they bumped into each other. Seeing Feng Ling's guilty and relieved expression, under the light in front of the base hall, her eyes seemed to be sparkling with stars. Li Nanheng was originally unhappy that this kiss was interrupted, but seeing that she was more and more open in the base, no longer playing the role of a man as before, and no longer minded leaving the base, she had gradually let go of her own nature. He gradually smiled for no reason. Seeing her like this, his mood was particularly good. Feng Ling didn't notice that the man was smiling, but after temporarily leaving the two people behind, she suddenly remembered the scene just now, and this seemed to be a little embarrassing. Chapter 1193. She didn't look at the man's expression but looked at the light not far away. "Well, I've kissed you just now. Don't be angry. When I'm free, let's kiss you." Li Nanheng pinched her chin and turned her face to look at his dissatisfied face. "When did you kiss me? Didn't I kiss you just now?" Feng Ling was forced to turn her eyes to the man's face and stared at his chin. Li Nanheng was so angry that he laughed. "You call this kissing?" After all, she knew that she had been busy with the newcomers in the past few days and had neglected Boss Li, whom she had wanted to treat well, but she had to be responsible for them. As for Li Nanheng, he was also one of them. As the boss of the base, he should be able to understand if she squeezed a little time for the newcomers. But from his expression, he was obviously very dissatisfied. Where was the noble sentiment of the boss of the base? There were surveillance cameras and lights all around. Feng Ling saw the man's expression as if he was expecting something. She hung her hands on both sides of her body for a long time and was about to touch his lips when suddenly, Ah Feng's voice came in very untimely. "You too, the base hall is such a sacred and solemn place. Don't you dare to do this?" Feng Ling, who was about to take the initiative to kiss him, suddenly felt as if she had been electrocuted. She pushed the man in front of her away and quickly left the scene. Li Nanheng, damn. He turned to look at Ah Feng, only to see that Ah Feng didn't seem to have disturbed others at all. At this time, Feng Ling ran past him quickly and entered the hall without saying a word. The base hall was indeed not a casual place. In front of the main entrance of the base hall, there was a closed glass room. Every member who sacrificed for the base would have a special name card in it. There were hundreds of name cards in it, all of which belonged to the heroes who had worked in the base for decades. Li Nanheng calmed down and walked up the stairs in front of the hall numbly, too lazy to say a word. Seeing Boss Li's sullen expression, Feng asked him, "Boss, if you really can't stand it, take Feng Ling out of the base to rest for 2 days." Li Nanheng said lightly, "Thank you for your suggestion. Those newcomers have just become familiar with her, and it is the early stage of training to build the mutual trust between the drill master and the members. Now let her go out to rest for 2 days, and when she comes back, the 20 people will be like a plate of loose sand again. It means that her hard work in the past 4 days will be all in vain. You let her train those team members from morning to night, and she doesn't even have time for herself." Feng said awkwardly, "It's not that I made her work so hard. You know Feng Ling's temper. Back then, she was such a serious person. If she really valued something, she would definitely do her best. If she wanted to get up early and work late, I couldn't stop her. Will you arrange another deputy drill master for her?" Speaking of deputy drill master, Li Nanheng frowned. "Find someone she can use. If it doesn't work, call K over. The sniper team is busy with the military exercise next month. The 4 members can't spare any time. K is one of the key trainees there, so it's impossible for him to be the deputy drill master. As for the others..." Feng looked up and down at Li Nanheng. "Boss, are you sure you won't be angrier if I arrange another man to help him?" Li Nanheng turned around coldly and was about to leave. "I'm serious. If I were to poach an assistant drill master from another team to help her, she would have another close brother by her side." Feng said very seriously, "Boss, if you really don't mind, I'll start to make arrangements. I guarantee that she'll be replaced tomorrow." Li Nanheng suddenly turned back and said coldly, "Do you think I'm dead? Won't you arrange me in?" The corner of Feng's mouth twitched. "This is against the rules. You are the boss. The team you take over is either an elite team or a key training team like the sniper team. Many of the newcomers who haven't been screened and eliminated are ugly. Boss, if you go there, you will probably be angered to death by them. Besides, now is the time for you and Feng Ling to avoid suspicion. If you help her lead the team, what will the people in the other team think of you? After all, before the screening and elimination, they have to think it's fair. And this is not right, right? Why didn't Li Nanheng notice so many rules in the base before? In the past, Feng Ling was a man in everyone's eyes, so there were not so many rules. Now she was a woman, so there were more and more rules. He was the boss of the base. Every inch of this place belonged to him, but now he couldn't even hug his own woman. Seeing that Boss Li was very unhappy, Feng hurriedly smiled apologetically. "How about this weekend? I'll give these newcomers a day or 2 off. Boss, you can also take these 2 days off and take Feng Ling out for a walk. I don't know how far you and Feng Ling have progressed, but it's too ambiguous to kiss each other outside the base hall. I really shouldn't do that." Li Nanheng didn't even kiss Feng Ling's lips and was suspected of being ambiguous here. He felt a little tired and left expressionlessly. Feng hurriedly explained behind him, "Boss, what I said is true. Then I'll really arrange an assistant for her tomorrow." Li Nanheng paused, looked back, and sneered. Feng, forget it, he would help her occasionally. If he really arranged an assistant for her, Boss Li would really eat him up. However, it turned out that Feng overestimated Boss Li's trust in him. In this entire base, except for Kay, who had grown up with Feng Ling and didn't dare to have any thoughts about Feng Ling, there was really no one worthy of Li Nanheng's trust. So Boss Li thought of a very dirty way, yes, very dirty. That was, Li Nanheng didn't reveal his identity in front of the newcomers, but directly pretended to be the drill master of the newcomers arranged by the base and went to be Feng Ling's assistant. And Boss Li also said that it was not that he had never been her assistant before, so he would arrange it in this way. Feng was dumbfounded and couldn't say a word about this overly forceful decision. Chapter 1194. Not to mention that there were leaky walls everywhere in this base. Even if boss could pretend for a day, he couldn't pretend for a month. Sooner or later, his identity would be exposed. He couldn't pretend for a few days at all. But as the boss of the base, he was so persistent to be Feng Ling's assistant and to train a group of newcomers with unknown qualifications. Was the power of love so great? Boss Li, who was so great that he used to avoid women when he saw them, now almost wanted to be with Feng Ling every day. It was, really, too, frightening. On the first day that Li Nanheng pretended to be the deputy drill master of the training camp, Feng Ling looked at the deputy drill master that Ah Feng arranged for her. She was already calm enough not to roll her eyes on the spot. After watching him silently for a while, she knew that Ah Feng probably didn't dare to compete with Li Nanheng anymore. If he did, his power in charge would be removed, and his face would be hurt. Ah Feng was sent here by the 4 elders of the Li family, and he was the Li family's representative. She simply waved her hand, asked someone to keep the deputy drill master here, and let Ah Feng go first. Then, this group of immature newcomers saw with their own eyes a deputy drill master who was stricter than Feng Ling, even fiercer, and even like a devil when training them. How could this training method be like this? This kind of training was no different from corporal punishment. Drill Master Feng Ling asked them to run 1 kilometer with a weight of 50 kilograms, but as soon as this deputy drill master came, he directly asked them to run 3 kilometers with a weight of 100 kilograms. This was simply killing them. However, strangely, when the deputy drill master made this request, Feng Ling, as the main drill master, just glanced at him and then didn't say anything. She didn't refuse him. Who was the main drill master and who was the deputy? Why didn't drill master Feng Ling show her cold temper at this time? The reason why Feng Ling didn't say anything at this moment was that she was not sure what was wrong with Li Nanheng. He should also know that these newcomers had not received systematic training. If he was too harsh, their bodies couldn't bear it. He should even know better than her how the newcomers should start little by little. But he still asked them to carry this weight. Obviously, he was merciless. For what? She recalled carefully. Just now, when the members were taking a break, Wanku seemed to have filled her cup with water and then sat next to her and asked her several questions about her usual physical training. She held the cup and patiently answered him. After that, Li Nanheng, who had been merciful, turned into a devil. As she thought of this, the slightly dull emotional thread in her brain suddenly snapped, as if she had found the source of the problem. At this moment, the usually cold-faced demon goddess looked thoughtfully at the young lads who were running with weights in the camp and then at Li Nanheng. The man casually picked up her cup and took a sip. Then he frowned, as though there was something wrong with the taste of ordinary warm water. He poured the water away, rinsed the cup with water, picked up the simple thermos in the camp, and poured a cup. Then he walked over and handed it to her. Drink it. Feng Ling, she didn't take the cup. Seeing that the members had run far away and couldn't see her, she looked at the man in front of her and said seriously, Li Nanheng, you asked me to return to the base and arranged for me to be the drill master of the newcomers. Since you've paved the way for me, I'll take over this baton and continue to work hard. I'll try my best to complete the task given to me with 100 points. Hearing her words, Li Nanheng knew what she was going to say. I didn't mean to disturb you. I just wanted to help you because it's too tiring for you to take care of these kids alone. Is there a problem? You're the boss of the base. Do you think there's a problem? Why? Can't boss go around incognito? Can't he teach the newbies? After the training period, there will be a screening assessment for Team 1 and Team 2, and then there will be a follow-up elimination assessment. If your identity is known by the people of the other team, what will they think? If boss comes to Team 1 to supervise and guide them, the newcomers of Team 2 will all collapse? Well, when my identity is exposed, I'll go to Team 2 to keep an eye on them for 2 days, which will consolidate the morale of both teams and mobilize more enthusiasm. 2 birds with 1 stone, the man said calmly. From what he said, it seemed like he had already thought about it. Feng Ling was speechless and stared at him for a long time. There are too many eyes in the base. I can't hide my identity for too long. I don't have so much time to play disguise with these kids. When I'm not busy, I'll come to help you. Otherwise, I'll leave, okay? Seeing that she was staring at him, the man softened his voice and coaxed her. I'll try not to torture them. With that, the man's eyes became slightly cold. As long as those boys who overestimate themselves in front of you know how to behave. Feng Ling, Wan Ku. He is an orphan like me. I know. These 3 words were enough to show that Li Nanheng trusted her, but at the same time, it didn't mean that he wouldn't be jealous. Feng Ling's understanding of love was really limited. She didn't know what kind of love she had. She just watched a man who wantonly killed enemies on the battlefield standing in front of her, patiently telling her his thoughts, wouldn't tolerate misunderstandings, wouldn't let her repeatedly avoid rejection, and would be jealous because of a boy who loved her so much. She didn't speak anymore but just looked at the man. After a long time, she moved her lips and said, "He is a good seedling. I'll guide him normally and train him normally. Is that okay?" Li Nanheng didn't speak but raised his eyebrows and looked at her indifferently, which clearly meant to say, "Do as you see fit?" It was just a very simple relationship between a drill master and a newcomer. They usually talked in front of everyone. What was there to be jealous of? Feng Ling touched her forehead and didn't say anything. She took the cup of water that the man had handed to her for a long time and put it in her hand. She lowered her head and took a sip of water, feeling that this water tasted no different from the water that others had poured for her before. However, when she looked up while drinking, she saw Li Nanheng's expression as if she were drinking some magic potion. She resisted the urge to roll her eyes at him and turn back to continue drinking water, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help curling up. Chapter 1195. At noon, Feng Ling found the answer as to why Li Nanheng cared so much about Wan Ku. After running for so long, the newcomers were so tired that they almost collapsed. At noon, they finally went to the canteen of the base to rest for a while, so they went to the canteen in groups and sat in their respective seats, talking about today's events in private. Men were always rude to each other, and they were certainly dissatisfied with the arrangement of the deputy drill master today. I don't know what the leaders of the base are thinking. Why did they send such a cold-blooded devil to be the deputy drill master? If I had run another 200 meters, I think I would have vomited blood and died on the spot. Yes, but this kind of old man is probably still an old bachelor after staying in the base for so long. He is so depressed and twisted that he is used to abusing others. Hearing the words, old man, Feng Ling, who was drinking water at the table, choked. Only 27 or 28 years old. She suddenly looked up at Li Nanheng, who was sitting diagonally opposite her, only to see that the man put down his chopsticks expressionlessly and continued to listen. That's right. Drill Master Feng Ling doesn't seem to be very old, and the drill master of Team 2 seems to be in his early 20s. Why did the base suddenly send such an old man? He must have been in the base for so many years, but he only got the position of deputy drill master. Tut, 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 Feng Ling. She looked at Li Nanheng again, only to see that there was no anger on his face and even a faint smile on his lips. But it was worse than a smile. It sent chills down her spine. But then again, in the eyes of teenagers, was 27 or 28 years old? Seeing that Li Nanheng was about to get up, Feng Ling abruptly picked up a drumstick from her plate and put it into his plate. Seeing this, the man paused and glanced at her. Feng Ling was not good at coaxing people, but she felt that these newcomers had been with her for a few days. She instinctively wanted to protect them, but she didn't want to make Li Nanheng too angry, so she could only use this unskilled and awkward method to throw a chicken leg to please Boss Li, who was worth 10 billion yuan. At the same time, she forced a slightly stiff smile. Boss, eat the chicken leg. Li Nanheng looked at the chicken drumstick that suddenly appeared on his plate and then at Feng Ling's forced smile. The corners of his eyes twitched. At the table not far away, the newcomers who didn't know that Feng Ling had lost a drumstick because of their words were still whispering. At this moment, their topic had shifted from the new deputy drill master to discussing various levels of status and class in the base. Speaking of the position distribution of drill masters in the base, although the new drill master was a drill master, he had the lowest basic position, which was equivalent to the bottom of the lower class. The assistant drill master of the new drill master was even lower than the bottom of the lower class. It was really a failure for him to get this position at such an old age. Then they continued to discuss until they talked about Ah Feng's position, and in the end, they suddenly didn't dare to say anything. Then someone trembled and asked what the legendary Boss Li was. They immediately shushed him and then lowered their voices. Boss Li is already very intimidating, okay? Keep your voice down. I don't dare to talk to other people, but I don't dare to talk to Boss Li. Boss Li, who had just been tortured by their words for a long time, sat at the table expressionlessly, endured Feng Ling's awkward and polite smile, and listened to these idiots. In the end, Wan Ku and another member of the new team, after seeing Feng Ling and the deputy drill master's faces from a distance, hurriedly sat at the table and coughed a few times. Only then did they suddenly look back, saw Feng Ling's expression, realized that they were whispering too loudly, and hurriedly shut up in fright. But it was useless to shut up now. When Feng Ling took the initiative to gently put a glass of juice in front of him, Li Nanheng smiled faintly and pushed the juice back to her. In the afternoon, the devil's training continued. He was too gentle and spoiled these newcomers, spoiling them so much that they didn't even know the immensity of heaven and earth. That afternoon, Feng Ling met the devil who singled her out to train alone. Well, he was even worse than that devil. The youth training team under her command, Team 1, had collapsed from exhaustion after 4 hours of training in the afternoon. In the end, someone couldn't stand it anymore. When Li Nanheng answered the phone and left the training ground, he sat crookedly against the camp and complained with a sad face, "Is the deputy drill master so powerful? Why does he set rules for us? Drill Master Feng, he even despises your position. He must have a psychological problem to torture us like this." The others also echoed weakly. "He is simply training us to death." Several people said desperately, "I'm afraid that if this goes on, we will die on the training ground before the screening assessment begins." Wan Ke was worried. Wan Ke said with a heavy heart, "Since we've entered the base, we'll receive this kind of devilish training sooner or later. It's okay to break through our physical limits. I'm just worried that you'll be bullied by the deputy drill master because you're too young. We can't do anything about it. You've just decided on our training mode, but the deputy drill master broke your original plan. And you seem to be dissatisfied with it, but you can't stop Drill Master Feng. Will he try to seize power and take your position as the chief drill master?" Wan Ke said with a heavy heart. How could a 19-year-old boy say that she was too young? And he was worried that she would be bullied by others? Wan Ke smiled. "It's not as complicated as you think. This kind of training beyond our physical limits is not bad except that it's a little tiring. I also experienced this kind of training. If we find our physical limits as early as possible, we can break through our limits as early as possible. In this way, when the screening assessment comes, if our team can have more than 5 people, we may be able to have more than 10 people in the end. There's no harm in having more people." The member who spoke first sat there, sweating as he said indignantly, oh no, Drill Master Feng must have been bullied by that old fox. We've been with you for so many days. How could you speak up for him?" 4M. Chapter 1196. Did she obviously speak for Li Nanheng? Only then did Feng Ling realize that she seemed to be protecting Li Nanheng's image in front of these people just now. But the point was that they caused this result. They talked nonsense in the base cafeteria. Although they knew that Boss Li was not to be trifled with, they didn't even dare to mention Boss Li's name, but they still fell into Boss Li's trap. This afternoon, because of this matter, she didn't interrupt and let Li Nanheng torment them. In any case, he was the boss of the base. He knew what he was doing and wouldn't kill anyone. She had been picked out by him to train in the base, but she didn't die of exhaustion. After all, she was an elite member trained by him. It was not a bad thing for these people to experience this early. She was just telling the truth. We're all brothers in the base. There's no bullying. What did you learn outside at such a young age? In 11 base, there's only brotherhood. There's no such thing as level suppression, Feng Ling said lightly. But drill master, you are a woman. You treat them as brothers, but they don't necessarily treat you as brothers. I think the deputy drill master is obviously bullying the little girl. Someone complained. Another person suddenly said as if there was a flash of light in his eyes, "Hey, do you think the deputy drill master likes the drill master? Drill master Feng is so beautiful. There must be a lot of people who like her." That's right, but drill master Feng, you must keep your eyes open. You can't like anyone. The deputy drill master is fierce, violent, and has a bad temper. More importantly, his level in the base is even lower than yours. He is really not an ordinary person. Feng happened to come in at this time. Suddenly hearing these words, he held back his laughter and walked behind Feng Ling. When he cleared his throat, the newcomers who were still complaining were scared and quickly shut up. Drill Master Feng, the date of the first assessment of the youth training team has been arranged. This is the training program that needs to be evaluated. Take a look. Feng handed a document in his hand to her. Feng Ling took a look at it and didn't say anything. At the same time, Feng said earnestly in front of everyone, "The deputy drill master you're talking about is a big shot that everyone in our base is fighting to have him guide. Hundreds of members have been waiting for many years, but they may not be able to get him to guide them personally. Be satisfied, What do you mean by big hands? Is it the deputy drill master's devilish training method?" Someone objected in a low voice. Feng smiled. "Did any of you faint from exhaustion?" Everyone thought about it and didn't say anything. It's not so easy to break through the physical limit. Many drill masters in the base try to let their members break through the limit as soon as possible, but if the strength is not well controlled, or the training procedures and order are wrong, many people will suffer muscle strain or other physical damage. But your current deputy drill master seems to be merciless to you, but does anyone have a muscle strain? Does anyone feel that they are useless? Which training is not done according to the standard procedures? Everyone, if one day you know the identity of this deputy drill master, you will be scared to death. How dare you criticize him here? Don't you see that even a stubborn and cold-tempered person like Drill Master Feng is willing to temporarily retreat to the second line? It's not your fault that you are young, but it's your fault that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If you don't know how to observe people's words and expressions, you will only suffer more losses. After being inexplicably reprimanded by the manager of the base hall, those members who were complaining just now didn't say anything anymore. However, each of them had a huge wave in their hearts, and they began to doubt the identity of that deputy drill master in fear. Li Nanheng had just received a call and went to another training camp. When he came back, he suddenly heard the conversation inside. Feng Ling also felt that they didn't cherish such a good opportunity. There were very few opportunities for Li Nanheng to personally guide them. She had experienced it herself, so she knew that although Li Nanheng seemed to be too lazy to guide those members, as long as he really spoke, he would never make a mistake. Whether it was his physical strength or his teaching ability, he was definitely not ordinary. However, he was used to being a hands-off leader and was too lazy to lead the team. Usually, most of the tasks were handed over to the drill masters in the base. Except for the sniper team that he personally supervised, no other team had such an opportunity. Feng Ling also said, "Feng is right. When I was a newcomer, I was at the same stage as you. I suspected that I would die of exhaustion on the training ground, but later I found that the sooner I could surpass my physical limit, the sooner I could dig out my potential. This will also be of great help to the absorption of physical strength in all aspects in the future. If you can stand firm under the training mode of the deputy drill master, I believe that the final screening test results will be very good. Maybe none of you will leave, and you will all be able to stay in the base safely." Stand firm? The members were still sitting on the ground, so tired that they didn't even have the strength to speak. After a long time, they said, "All right." But she still couldn't help saying, "Drill Master Phone, no matter what, you're still our main drill master. How can you ignore the fact that someone stole your limelight? Why are you speaking up for him? Is it responsibility? Is it cowardice?" Yes. Li Nanheng couldn't listen to it anymore. He coughed and there was silence inside. Then, as if he hadn't heard anything, Li Nanheng entered the training camp inside and glanced coldly at the members of Team 1 who were temporarily resting on the ground. Feng held back his laughter and said in a low voice that only she could hear, "It's love." Feng Ling, apart from Boss Li, there was no other person in the entire base who could make someone as bad-tempered as Feng Ling to stand aside silently and take a back seat. Even if Feng Ling had her own ideas, Boss Li had personally promoted her back then. Boss Li had personally taken her out for training. In terms of physical training, as long as Nanheng spoke, she could be considered as half a little disciple to him. How could she say more? "Why are you sitting there? Haven't you had enough rest? Come back to the team in 3 minutes and go to training," Li Nanheng said coldly. In a short sentence, the group of people on the ground trembled in an instant. They were so tired that their limbs were trembling, but they didn't dare to resist, so they got up with a sad face and continued to train. 4M. Chapter 1197. Li Nanheng didn't show any attitude, but he was in a good mood. Thinking that Feng Ling, who usually didn't talk much, was defending him in front of these young boys, he smiled. He was well aware of the physical conditions of these new members. Even if he was just a deputy drill master, as the person in charge of the base, he had habitually checked the information of all of them before they entered the base. All of them were healthy young men who could withstand torture. Now they had been severely tortured on the training ground. Just like arrows on the battlefield in ancient times, the harder they were polished, the brighter and sharper they would be. Moreover, these young boys were indeed in need of torture. If they practiced hard, they would be too tired to sit together and gossip, and they would know that it was time to shut up. But there were still some who were not sensible. For example, in the evening, they finally went back to rest. Tomorrow was the weekend, and Li Nanheng was going to put aside the matters in the base for 2 days and take Feng Ling out to have a good rest. However, before Wan Ku went back to his residence, he had been following Feng Ling, asking her if she was free on the weekend and if she wanted to go out for dinner with him. He also said that he had never lived in Los Angeles before and wanted Feng Ling to take him out for a walk. He asked, and Feng Ling answered. The base hall was close to the place where the newcomers lived, so Wan Ku walked side by side with Feng Ling. Although he was only 19 years old, he was already more than 1.8 meters tall and didn't look like a child next to Feng Ling. On the contrary, Feng Ling's skin was fair and her eyes were clear, and she occasionally looked like a clean and steady high school student with short hair. Seeing that Feng Ling was very serious about these newcomers, Li Nanheng endured it. Seeing that the boy kept pestering her, he didn't say anything. Han Jin and Xiao Su were looking for him, so Li Nanheng went straight to the conference room. When he returned to the base hall, he saw that Wan Ku was still following Feng Ling, and neither of them seemed to be in a hurry to go back to their respective residences. The two were sitting on a bench near the hall. Feng Ling was holding an assessment document and talking to him. Wan Ku was sitting next to her, listening carefully and nodding from time to time. When he nodded, he turned his eyes to Feng Ling, who had been staring at the document in her hands seriously, as if he couldn't wait to stare at her. Since she had become a drill master, it was natural for her to be strict and indifferent on the training ground. But now, in private, when newbies came to ask her all kinds of things, she could sit there and answer patiently, with a calm and steady attitude. She didn't notice that Wan Ku often looked at her with admiration. She just looked at the document in her hand and said patiently, "Every batch of newcomers in the base is greatly expanded, but in the end, only 1/5 of them are left. Many of them can't even pass the most basic physical assessment, so the base won't let them stay. If you want to develop in the base, you should practice more on these subjects. In addition to training on the training ground, you can ask other brothers to help you stretch your limbs and do balance training. It won't take much time. Just do it on the ground for a while before going to bed every day. Suddenly, the light in front of her and Wan Ku was blocked, and a large shadow fell in front of her and Wan Ku. Fong Ling paused, raised her eyes and suddenly saw Li Nanheng. It was already night and the light in front of the base hall was bright enough, but if the light was blocked, she couldn't see anything clearly. The man's back was to the light behind him, so she couldn't see his expression clearly, but Fong Ling instinctively felt the coldness around him. She subconsciously looked at Wan Ku, who was very close to her, thought of something, and hurriedly moved aside. Wan Ku also raised his eyes. When he saw Li Nanheng, he was wondering who this deputy drillmaster was. Why did he seem to be everywhere? Deputy drillmaster, why haven't you gone to rest? Wan Ku raised his head and asked with a smile. Although he couldn't see Fong Ling's expression, he couldn't continue to pay attention to Fong Ling's cold and oppressive gaze, so he raised his head and asked with a smile. Deputy drillmaster, why haven't you gone to rest yet? Fong Ling put the document on her lap, and before Li Nanheng spoke, she said, Wan Ku, you can go back now. It's really late. If you have anything else to ask, I'll ask you during training. Okay. Wan Ku nodded, took out his cell phone and took a look at the time, and suddenly said, Drillmaster Fong Ling, although this is the base and everything is under military management, you are still a girl after all. It's so cold in Los Angeles. You don't wear much every day. Fong Ling, fortunately, I wear a lot of clothes. She was wearing clothes that could keep her warm. In fact, she wasn't cold at all. It was just that she looked thin. Before she finished speaking, Wan Ku suddenly took off his own jacket and handed it to Fong Ling. Tomorrow is the weekend. I heard that we can move freely these 2 days and don't need to train. Put this jacket back on. Don't catch a cold. Fong Ling hesitated and didn't take it, feeling that if she took it, something might happen. Li Nanheng's cold voice rang at this time. I thought this batch of newcomers was not familiar with various aspects of the base, but it seems that this little brother has a good relationship with Drillmaster Fong Ling. The man's voice sounded flat, but only Fong Ling could hear the cold tone in it. Wan Ku smiled. Is that so? Maybe it's because Drillmaster Fong is a good person, and Drillmaster Fong and I are very similar in many aspects. We are the same kind of people and have the same experience. We are the same kind of people, we are the same kind of people, we are the same kind of people, we are the same kind of people. Who the hell is the same kind of person as you? As the boss of the base, Li Nanheng's calm barrier, which focused on the overall situation, was shattered with a crack. The indifferent smile on Li Nanheng's face disappeared completely. He loosened his collar and nodded. Yes, we are the same kind of people. Fong Ling clenched her fists because of Li Nanheng's words. She looked up at the man standing against the light and didn't take Wan Ku's jacket. At the same time, she hurriedly stood up. All right, let's go. I'm going back to rest. Li Nanheng expressionlessly pulled Fong Ling over and abruptly pulled her in front of him. Fong Ling. Before she finished speaking, she fell into the man's arms. 4M. Chapter 1198. After bumping into him, Fong Ling's expression remained calm, but her ears were already slightly hot. Li Nanheng hugged her and let her lean against his chest. He lifted her chin and made her face him. Clarify the relationship between the base. Li Nanheng pressed her with his hand and looked at Wan Ku, who was shocked. Do you need me to do anything? Fong Ling leaned against the man's arms and could hear his strong heartbeat. She paused and suddenly looked back at Wan Ku. When she was about to speak, Wan Ku looked at them in surprise. After a long while, Wan Ku said awkwardly, Deputy Drillmaster, I'm still a newcomer in the base. I don't know so many interpersonal relationships in the base. I admire Drillmaster Fong Ling very much, and I feel confident because she used to have the same past as me. Although Drill Master Feng Ling is usually cold and strict, I can see that she is actually a very gentle person, so I often ask her all kinds of questions, but I didn't expect. Wan Ku was a little embarrassed when he heard this. He paused and said awkwardly, "I didn't expect to make you misunderstand me." "I'm really sorry." Li Nanheng sneered. "Just admire her? Who would believe that? Admire her?" Every day, during the break between training, he stood by the thermos and almost took on the heavy responsibility of pouring water for Feng Ling. During meals, he also rushed to get food for Feng Ling. As long as there was an opportunity and time, he would stay by her side. Right now, he even dared to let Feng Ling wear his coat in front of Li Nanheng. Was this admiration? He was trying to poach Feng Ling from Li Nanheng. Didn't expect what? I didn't expect her to have a man, and her man is in the base, right in front of you. You didn't even give her a chance to take advantage of you? Wan Ku, Feng Ling. Wan Ku looked at Li Nanheng's cold expression. He knew at a glance that Li Nanheng's identity was not so simple. After all, Drill Master Feng Ling was usually so strict and cold, but in front of Li Nanheng, even Ah Feng, the person in charge of the base hall, was very polite to this deputy drill master. During the day, Wan Ku didn't pay much attention to the deputy drill master, because he was too tired to think about it. But now that Feng Ling was forcefully held in the man's arms, although she felt that it was inappropriate, she did not break free or say anything, which was enough to show that the relationship between the two of them was very harmonious. At least, their relationship was definitely two-way, and neither party was passive. Drill Master Feng Ling was so beautiful, so nice, and it was said that she had a very good record in the base. Such an excellent person, who was also the only woman in the base, had a relationship with this mysterious deputy drill master, which showed that the status of this deputy drill master was definitely beyond his imagination. Your drill master Feng Ling is my girlfriend. Not just my girlfriend, but also my wife who will spend the rest of her life with me. She will announce to the world that she will marry me. Li Nanheng looked at the boy. So, stay away from her, understand? Wan Ku suddenly woke up. Although he wasn't sure who this man was, he couldn't afford to offend him, so he didn't dare to have any improper thoughts. Got it. Seeing that this boy was smart and knew when to advance and retreat, Li Nanheng casually put his own uniform jacket on Feng Ling's shoulders. If you understand, then get lost. I have something to say to your drill master. Wan Ku hurriedly put on the jacket in his hand, and being stared at by Li Nanheng's cold eyes, he quickly left. Feng Ling was really annoyed by Li Nanheng's strong possessiveness. Just now, in front of the new members, she didn't want to embarrass Boss Li. Seeing that he had left, she turned her head and glared at him. I was talking to him openly outside the base hall. He didn't do anything to me, and I didn't do anything to him. Why are you so jealous? Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her. If I hadn't known his temper, I would have kissed him in front of him. Feng Ling, she knew that he would definitely do that. Although Wan Ku had scared away her men, it was not a bad thing. If Wan Ku could see the truth earlier, he would not take any detours. After all, apart from being smart and good at interpersonal relationships, there was nothing wrong with him. The world was unfair. Not everyone could climb up smoothly by being honest, especially an orphan without a backer. If he wanted to shine in the crowd and have a place in the position he wanted, he had to rely on his clever mind and means. She had also paid attention to Wan Ku's attitude. He was indeed very earnest to her, but in fact, he was only 19 years old. It wasn't easy for him to sneak into the base, so he didn't have much time to think about love. He just wanted to show his ambition and make the people above him like and accept him. He wanted to settle down here, so he was good at flattering others and didn't have any bad intentions. If Wan Ku really had feelings for Feng Ling would have avoided him long ago. She didn't want to miss such a smart, purposeful, and capable person. She hoped that he could seize the opportunity and develop well in the base. He doesn't have any bad intentions for me, and in my eyes, he is still a child. Although Fong Ling was still in Li Nanheng's arms, she didn't break free. If he dared to have any bad intentions, do you think I would let him stay until today? Li Nanheng sneered, hugged her tighter, and kissed her hair. Don't go too far. These boys are still young, but they have all passed puberty, especially for such a cold and aloof woman. Seeing her walking in front of them every day, they can't help but have bad intentions for her. Fong Ling's lips trembled. How can I be so popular? How can they have bad intentions for me? Why can't I see that I'm so good? The man raised his eyebrows. He held her head and kissed the top of her soft hair, but his voice was still cold as he said, very good. This old man has never made a wrong choice in this life. Especially right, it can't be any more right. Fortunately, that kid is smart, otherwise, he might not even have the chance to participate in the newcomer assessment. Chapter 1199. Fortunately, although he is young and impetuous, he didn't dare to do anything to you. Li Nanheng's tone was still cold, and his slender fingers rubbed against Fong Ling's dry lips. Otherwise, I might really do something impulsive in front of him. Hearing the words, impulsive, Fong Ling suddenly looked at the lights and surveillance cameras outside the hall and said in a low voice, even if someone wants to do something impulsive to me, they have to be able to get close to me. They can't beat me. She could understand Li Nanheng's mood after being left out for so many days after returning to the base. Otherwise, she would have pushed him away and rushed back to the hall alone. Tomorrow is the weekend. Let's go out. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and didn't continue to talk about other people. Instead, he hugged the woman in his arms tighter. Their first assessment is arranged next week, so they can only take time to rest this weekend. It's time to give me some benefits. Fong Ling coughed and didn't know where to put her hands. After a long while, she gave a low N. Seeing that she didn't resist, Li Nanheng was very pleased. He rubbed this little woman who seemed cold and ruthless but was very soft to him after being enlightened, kissed her on the back of her neck, then kissed her on the cheek, and whispered dirty words in her ear in a voice that only she could hear. Fong Ling's face instantly flushed with embarrassment. She quickly pushed him away and turned to hurry into the door of the base hall. Although she didn't seem to be angry on the surface, only she knew that her legs were a little weak because of the man's words. She felt as if there was a fire burning on her head. Fong had just come out of the bathroom in the hall, and his hands were still dripping with water. He glanced at Fong Ling, who was walking in with a straight face. He had seen what happened outside just now, but it was not appropriate for him to intervene. Seeing Fong Ling's expression, Fong smiled and teased, "Drill Master Fong Ling, the base is an important place. Be careful." Under Ah Feng's teasing gaze, Fong Ling was even angrier. She went upstairs without saying a word. Bang, 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 bang. On Saturday morning, there was a steady stream of gunfire on the shooting range. This location was far from the living quarters of the base, so the base members who could sleep a little longer were not disturbed. Only those who got up early on the weekend could hear the sound. She slept well and woke up early. She did not feel sleepy and returned to the sniper team's training camp. She held her sniper rifle and warmed up for a while. It had been a long time since she stood in front of a row of targets to train. She felt very good when she picked up the rifle. After practicing with the sniper team for a while, she took advantage of the fact that there was no one here to practice shooting over 100 meters. Kay and the others had a mission to go out today, so they got up early. They were about to leave when they passed by the shooting range. When they saw Fong Ling, they couldn't help but click their tongues. He had never seen a girl like Fong Ling who looked so valiant when she put on a uniform and picked up a gun, but looked so quiet and beautiful when she took off the uniform. Fortunately, Fong Ling was taken away by Boss Li, and no one dared to covet her. Otherwise, as long as Fong Ling was given a chance, the other boys in the base would fight for her. So handsome, so handsome, so handsome. Tam, who was walking with Kay, couldn't help touching his chin and clicking his tongue. Very handsome, right? You must have never seen Fong Ling put on a facial mask. Kay held back his laughter as he walked. Put on a facial mask? When? Tam squinted at him as if he had heard something impossible. Her? She can put on a facial mask? Are you kidding me? Really? Kay took out his cell phone from his pocket, opened the photo album, and handed it to him. Look, is it her? Just a few days ago in the hospital, I saw it with my own eyes. Because I took this photo, she chased me all over the hospital. Tam looked at the cell phone and then looked incredulous. Damn, the sun really rose from the west. Fong Ling can put on a facial mask, it's not that I can't understand. After all, she has confirmed her relationship with our boss. There are many women in love who try to become beautiful all day long. However, Fong Ling is probably the only one in this world who doesn't go to find her boyfriend on a weekend morning. Instead, she runs here to practice her shooting skills. Two men passed by here sneakily with their cell phones in their hands, looking at the back of Fong Ling holding a gun. It wasn't that she didn't feel the gaze behind her. Fong Ling was having a good time practicing her shooting. After leaving the base for so many years, it was rare for her to have some fun, so she ignored the two of them. However, their gazes became more and more ambiguous. She suddenly stopped and casually pulled the safety on the gun. She glanced back at the two of them coldly. Receiving her cold gaze, Kay's hand trembled, and he quickly put away his cell phone, for fear that this photo would be snatched away and deleted by her, and then he took Tam's hand and ran away quickly. Fong Ling practiced for a while and suddenly heard footsteps approaching behind her. She was very familiar with Li Nanheng's footsteps, so she knew it was him without looking back. Li Nanheng didn't have the habit of staying in bed. Even on weekends, he had a fixed time to get up. At this time, so early, there were not many people who could come to the shooting field. She guessed that he must have been shocked by her gunshots. The man didn't disturb her and let her practice here alone. After watching her use more than a dozen bullets here, he walked over and put one hand on her waist behind her. Fong Ling paused but didn't look back. The man raised his hand to adjust the angle of her arm holding the gun and let her aim the muzzle at the most difficult 12 consecutive targets in the shooting field. With one hand on her waist and the other on her wrist, he adjusted her posture and said, "Shoot." With a bang, the bullet quickly passed through the overlapping 12 consecutive targets, and the red center in the middle of the series of targets emitted a wisp of white smoke because of the rapid passing of the bullet. The angle was extremely accurate, right in the center, without the slightest error. At this moment, Fong Ling felt as if she had returned to many years ago. In the base, Li Nanheng also occasionally taught her by the side. She felt hot all over and was about to put down the gun and turn back, but suddenly felt the man behind her press her into his arms, bend down, and kiss her on the lips. Chapter 1200. The gun fell from her hand and landed on the table in front of the shooting range, and the man turned her body around. It was a weekend morning. It was rare that there were no slogans or footsteps in the base at this time. There was no one around. The man's kiss was gentle and affectionate, not as rough and direct as usual. Obviously, the way she stood here and practiced shooting hard also brought back a lot of memories. Most men were too lazy to recall the past, but Fong Ling had the ability to make a man like Li Nanheng recall some memories from many years ago. There was nothing better than watching his wife grow up bit by bit in front of him. The man was moved and hugged her, kissing her reluctantly. Li Nanheng smiled and kissed the corner of her mouth again. He pinched her chin with one hand, gently rubbed her rosy lips with his fingertips, and looked at her deeply. "Drill Master Fong, you're off today. Accompany me out of the base and find a place to have a good fight. How about that?" Fong Ling smiled and said, "How about you accompany me out of the base and find a place to have a good fight?" Under the man's attack, Fong Ling nodded with a sullen expression. Of course, she knew what a spar was. Li Nanheng was satisfied. What are you two doing? Han Jin had long heard the gunshots here. Everyone in the base had practiced shooting until they were sick of it. Hearing such diligent movements, he guessed that it was Feng Ling. When she was in the base, she often came to practice alone like this. She was more serious and diligent than anyone else, and the frequency of shooting was almost the same as in the past. After eating a few mouthfuls of breakfast, he was about to go out to buy something on the weekend, but when he passed by here, he saw the two of them kissing each other. He was so angry that his teeth almost fell. Is boss really going to take the lead to completely change the atmosphere of the base? Does he think Feng Ling is still a tomboy and can take the opportunity to kiss her? Now everyone knows that she is a girl. In public, are you two talking about love in the shooting range? Li Nanheng said lazily, in public? Where? Han Jin, who represented the crowd by himself, was speechless. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. Although it's indeed gratifying that little Feng Ling is back, don't forget that Feng is very strict now, especially now there are still people, hoping that one day when the two of them quarrel and break up, Feng Ling will leave the base in a fit of anger and give up the position of drill master. Han Jin looked at Feng Ling again. Although the position of drill master for newcomers doesn't sound as powerful as the position of deputy drill master of the shooting range, there are still a lot of people keeping an eye on it. Do you know how many people are waiting to catch you? In terms of raw strength, they really can't find any fault with him. However, those people from Team 3 also know about this. They've been complaining about him in private ever since he came back. Now, they often talk about this matter with boss in private. Even a small movement can be made into a story from all angles. I really have to give it to them. A group of men can actually talk so much nonsense when they're unhappy with someone. It turned out that those people in Team 3 who didn't like her would definitely be unhappy. However, since she came back, she hadn't had a chance to contact them, so she didn't pay attention to them. She didn't listen to other people's private gossip, so she didn't know what they were talking about. It was rare for Han Jin to see Feng Ling. After all, she was really too busy in the past few days and had been in the training team. When he saw her, he just gave her a few words to remind her in case she heard some unpleasant words from Team 3 one day and got angry again. However, Feng Ling said calmly, when I came back to be the shooting coach, I was really guilty and didn't want to take such an important position. But as a drill master, I can still bear the responsibility. I'm not afraid of them talking about me. If they don't like me, just come and fight me. Hearing this, Han Jin raised his eyebrows and then smiled. He didn't expect Feng Ling to say such arrogant words. It was really rare. Feng Ling was even more arrogant and condescending. Even a few people may not be able to beat me. Do I need to take the words of this kind of trash seriously? Li Nanheng didn't say anything. He just looked at the woman with calm eyes in front of him, and the smile on the corner of his mouth didn't disappear. Han Jin's words were also to give her a heads up, so that she wouldn't be able to live with herself if she really encountered something bad. But the current Feng Ling was no longer the Feng Ling of the past. In the past, she was cautious, silent, and tried her best to reduce her sense of existence. She was unwilling to offend anyone. She used to be quiet in the base, which left a deep impression on others. She was the only one in the base who knew her well. Now, although she was not high profile, she had no intention of spoiling those people who were not worth mentioning at all. Now, her heart was firm and steady. The experience outside for the past 3 years had also made her regain a lot of confidence and the way to get along with people. She would no longer blindly hide from those who were right and wrong. Instead, she would deal with the situation according to the situation. If the former Feng Ling was a piece of unpolished jade waiting to be carved, now she was a high-quality jade that had been carved and was even emitting light. She was no longer the little Feng Ling who needed everyone to drive her emotions and drag her to participate in all kinds of fun, nor was she the little Feng Ling who trained hard every day and waited to advance by leaps and bounds in every assessment. She was now Feng Ling. She had grown up, had her own views, and had her own outlook on life. Of course, Feng Ling didn't know how praiseworthy her rare arrogance was in the eyes of men. She just stared at Han Jin. Drillmaster Han, oh, no, it's Minister Han. Han Jin had long been promoted in the base. Back then, he was the leader of the best team one in the base. It was said that he had been promoted 2 years ago. Han Jin felt that Feng Ling seemed to have something to say, so he raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Feng Ling did want to say something. She recalled that she had accidentally heard the conversation between Han Jin and Xiao Su outside his room. At that time, Han Jin had casually said, "It's just a fruitless love. There's no need to take it to heart." Although he had only said these words to comfort Xiao Su, she had kept it in her heart for many years. It was because she knew that Han Jin was actually on her side that she really wanted to ask him if he had ever liked anyone. However, before she could ask, Li Nanheng saw that she had been staring at Han Jin and took her back into his arms expressionlessly. "Why are you wasting time with him? Come on, let's spar." Han Jin looked puzzled. "Spar? Where are we going?" Li Nanheng turned away with his arm around Feng Ling and waved his hand in the direction of Han Jin. "I don't have a common topic with this kind of eternal bachelor. He won't understand even if I explain." Han Jin. Dash, the meat is already stewing. Eat some biscuits first. Calm down, our boss Li is not really an animal. His mind can't be full of sex. He has to be sweet first, right? Chapter 12:01. Upstairs in the base hall, Feng Ling had just changed out of her black uniform when she suddenly heard a text message from her cell phone. She picked up her cell phone and saw a screenshot from Li Nanheng. He said that she had bought tickets for the afternoon cinema, and it was a couple's seat. The cinema gave her a small gift to choose from, including some cute dolls and some simple toys. Cinema? Was he going to take her to the movies? Feng Ling had never watched a movie outside. Although it was tacky in the eyes of other couples, in her eyes, she was looking forward to trying it. She felt a little sweet in her heart. She chose a pair of Mickey dolls and then asked, "What kind of seats are the couple's seats?" A few seconds after she sent the message, Feng Ling was about to take her coat when her cell phone vibrated again. "Li Nanheng, there is no partition in the middle. As soon as the lights are turned off, I can do whatever I want to you. I can kiss you if I want to. Are you afraid?" Feng Ling glanced at the phone screen and did not reply for a long time. Li Nanheng then sent another message, "Will you let me kiss you?" It was as if he could stop kissing her just because she said so. Feng Ling's finger paused on the screen for a while, and then she replied embarrassedly, "Yes." On the other side of the phone, Li Nanheng saw this word and a punctuation mark and smiled. Although it was the weekend, recently, because of the newcomers, the atmosphere of the entire base was very busy. This rare weekend rest was also because Ah Feng was scared by Boss Li and had to let Feng Ling rest temporarily. The newcomers also rested for 2 days today, and all of them were very happy. When Feng Ling left the base, she was wearing a casual sportswear, a black hooded sweater, a white woolen coat, and black trousers, which made her slender legs look even longer. She looked clean and neat, but still in her usual simple and casual style. Her bangs were long enough to cover her eyes, and she casually tucked them behind her ears with her fingers. Before leaving the base, she was bumped into by a newcomer in her team. Seeing that Feng Ling was not wearing a combat uniform, he whistled at her from a distance and asked her if she was going out. Feng Ling was looking down at her cell phone, and her cheeks were a little hot after hearing Li Nanheng's words. Suddenly hearing the newcomer's voice, she suddenly put her cell phone back into her pocket and glanced at him expressionlessly. Her eyes were cold and indifferent, which was completely different from when she was in front of Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng drove the car out of 11 base, and Feng Ling sat in the passenger seat. She was just going to watch a movie, but her heart was full. "What do you want to eat?" "We'll eat out for lunch and dinner. Think about it first, in case it's not easy to park the car." Li Nanheng said as he handed Feng Ling a bag of beef jerky. The theater is far from the base. It will take at least an hour to drive. Eat something to fill your stomach. This beef jerky was something that the members of the elite team had run out last night. When they returned, Li Nanheng bumped into them and they hurriedly handed it over with guilty expressions. Feng Ling held the food in her arms, thinking that she was not a foodie, but it smelled good. She took it out and tasted it. It was a little hard but very fragrant. She chewed hard and narrowed her eyes to look out of the window. After eating one, she subconsciously took out another and put it in her mouth. I'm asking you to fill your stomach, not to eat it in one go. We'll go for lunch later. Li Nanheng smiled. Okay. Feng Ling responded and quickly placed the beef jerky back on the seat. She then found an unopened bottle of mineral water in the car and unscrewed it to take a sip. As soon as she took a sip, Li Nanheng suddenly said, "Give me a sip too. I'm thirsty." Feng Ling was about to open a new bottle for him, but Li Nanheng glanced at her. Your bottle will do. With that, he looked away and continued to drive. Feng Ling, she paused for a moment and glanced at him again. Seeing that he was focused on driving, she unscrewed the mineral water in her hand and brought it to his mouth. As Li Nanheng drove, he drank 2 mouthfuls of water from the bottle she fed him. It was not that he had never kissed her before, and they had done more intimate things, but this action of taking the initiative to bring the bottle to his mouth was still very, unbelievably intimate. If it was Feng Ling who was still in the base a few years ago, she would never have thought that one day she would fall in love with Boss Li, leave the base with Boss Li to watch a movie outside, let alone take the initiative to feed him water like this. Along the way, Feng Ling held the bottle of water thoughtfully. During this period, Li Nanheng seemed to deliberately tease her. After a while, he said he wanted to drink water, and she fed him a little every now and then. In less than an hour, more than half of the bottle of water was drunk, and Feng Ling felt that she was getting thirstier. Seeing that the car had driven near downtown Los Angeles, she didn't look at the man in the driver's seat but looked away at the bustling streets passing by outside the window, opened the water bottle and took a sip. Li Nanheng smiled. Have you thought about what you want to eat? Feng Ling came back to herself and remembered the problem he had mentioned before. Furthermore, she had taken the initiative to bring up the date some time ago. It seemed that a date between the two of them was nothing more than eating, drinking, playing, and shopping. Especially eating was the main theme. She looked out of the window and was a little dazzled. Anything is fine. After returning to the base, there are still a few days of intensive training time. Don't waste the time of those newbies with stomachaches. Then don't eat spicy food. Eat something light. Li Nanheng parked the car in the parking space in front of a French restaurant and took her to eat French food on the first stop of the date. It was not that they hadn't eaten before, but at that time, their relationship was not clear, and Feng Ling was still stubborn. This time, although Feng Ling still didn't speak much, at least she cooperated in many aspects and tried to find the state of being in love. Although her face often burned because of Li Nanheng's occasional words during the meal, at least the sweetness was absolutely enough. When she was almost full, Feng Ling picked up a cup of milk tea that Li Nanheng ordered for her and took a few sips. Suddenly, she heard the man say, "Don't go back to the base tonight. Come back tomorrow afternoon. Is there anything else you want to do?" Hearing the words, "Don't go back to the base tonight," Feng Ling suddenly choked, put down the cup, and coughed. Li Nanheng glanced at her with a faint smile and sat at the table in this elegant French restaurant. Although he didn't say much, his eyes clearly said, "Do you think I will let you go back tonight?" Feng Ling. Chapter 1202. During this period, when Feng Ling went to the bathroom, she stood by the sink and the cold water washed over her hands. Thinking of her attitude at the dining table just now, she felt that she was a little spoiled. She knew why Li Nanheng took her out of the base today and what she had promised him. His meaning was so obvious just now, but she didn't speak as if she was very embarrassed. It was true that she was embarrassed, but she was the one who proposed the date and said that she owed him. She had made up her mind not to be the passive one. Li Nanheng had been good to her for so many years. She still had to change her cautious character. Fong Ling blew her hands dry, thought for a moment, and turned to walk out. When she returned to the dining table, Li Nanheng had already paid the bill. She asked, "What time is the movie?" "It will start in an hour and a half." Li Nanheng took her woolen coat and put it on her. "Put it on. Don't catch a cold." When Fong Ling followed him out of the restaurant, she suddenly asked, "Is there a supermarket nearby? What do you want to buy? Don't you have to buy some food and drinks when watching a movie?" Li Nanheng glanced at her. Fong Ling usually didn't eat much, and she had eaten a lot just now. He didn't think she could eat anything in the theater later, but since she had already made a request, he certainly wouldn't refuse and drove to a large supermarket nearby. She said she wanted to buy some food and drinks, but after entering the supermarket, Li Nanheng pushed the shopping cart to the shelf selling snacks and drinks to help her choose food. However, Fong Ling turned around and searched for a long time before she found the shelf selling condoms. Standing in front of the exquisite boxes of various colors, she was dazzled. Li Nanheng chose a few kinds of food that Fong Ling could eat and was about to get a drink when he noticed that she hadn't followed him for a long time. He turned back to look for her, pushed the shopping cart around several shelves, and finally saw Fong Ling, who looked helpless but pretended to be calm, holding a box of condoms in her hand. Li Nanheng's temples twitched. He walked over, glanced at her, and then looked at the colorful boxes in front of her. Only then did he understand why she said she wanted to come to the supermarket. He smiled, took the red box out of her hand, and threw it back into the shelf. "This one doesn't suit me." "Ah." It seemed that there were all kinds of brands here, such as India and Japan. She didn't understand Japanese and other countries' languages, nor could she understand what was written on it. Suddenly, her hand was empty. She turned to see Li Nanheng's meaningful expression and was instantly embarrassed. I don't know how to choose." Li Nanheng's face darkened. "I don't know how to choose." Li Nanheng's face darkened. "I don't know how to choose." The woman, who was usually majestic, now had an embarrassed expression on her face. Facing her unknown territory, she was trying her best to cooperate with him, trying her best to get closer to him. Obviously, she remembered what he had said about how many steps they had walked together, and she was trying her best to walk in his direction. For a moment, Li Nanheng suddenly regretted it. Why did he buy a movie ticket and watch a movie? He should have taken her to the hotel and doted on her for 2 days. Why did he pretend to be a gentleman? It was a waste of time to watch a movie and eat Western food. He should have directly taken her to the hotel, and from now on, he would not leave the bed until tomorrow afternoon when he returned to the base. Li Nanheng placed one hand on the shopping cart and the other on the shelf in front of him. He picked up a box of threaded peppermint-flavored ones and turned to look at her. Fong Ling stared at him with wide eyes. Obviously, he could choose anything, but her eyes still followed his hand as if trying to remember which one he chose. Seeing her expression, the man moved his hand away from the box without batting an eyelid. He then turned to look at the golden box that was half a shelf away. Fong Ling's gaze followed his hand and moved over. She looked at the beautiful Indian words that she did not recognize. After choosing for a long time, Li Nanheng couldn't bear to continue teasing her. He turned back, picked up a silver box with Japanese words, and threw it into the shopping cart. Fong Ling looked down at the one he chose in the end. It was written with something like Book 001. That's it. At this time, a salesman passed by. Li Nanheng knew that Fong Ling was shy, so he said lightly in a voice that only she could hear, "The size of the one you just took is too small. It doesn't suit me." Fong Ling was startled, and then her face was burning. It was the first time since she left the base that she blushed so much. She simply turned her eyes away from him. The man smiled as he pushed the shopping cart, stretched out his long arm, and held this little woman who was so cute that he wanted to find a place to press her on the bed right now into his arms. He bent down and kissed her on the head. "I'll buy it in the future. It doesn't matter what brand it is. Remember to choose a bigger size." "Li Nanheng, you." Fong Ling suddenly turned her eyes, but the man directly sealed her lips. There were so many people around. Fong Ling's hair stood on end and she looked aside from time to time. In the end, the man was in a really good mood. Before she lost her temper, he let her go and kissed the tip of her nose. "Let's go and pay the bill." Fong Ling was no longer blushing, but she was forcibly held by him to the checkout counter. Until they left the supermarket, her face was still unbelievably hot. She felt that it was not right for her to be too indulgent to a shameless man like Li Nanheng. When she didn't take the initiative, he was already unrestrained enough. If she took the initiative, he would probably swallow her alive. 15 minutes before the movie began, the two of them arrived at the cinema. After entering, they found a couple's seat. This seat was on the second floor of a luxurious cinema hall. The angle and view of the movie were very good, and it was very hidden. There were several couples' seats in the back, and there were also many young couples behind. During this period, Fong Ling seemed to hear someone kissing behind her. Although she was not hungry, she quickly took out a bag of original potato chips to eat. However, after taking a few bites, the man beside her took the bag in her hand away, and then, a Hollywood blockbuster movie took about 2.5 hours. In the first half an hour, she was too embarrassed to watch because she heard the kissing sounds between the young couples, and in the last 2 hours, she was almost pressed on the sofa and kissed by Li Nanheng. Originally, Li Nanheng simply wanted her to experience these processes that she had never experienced before, but this little woman's appearance in the supermarket really made him want to die. Chapter 1203. If it weren't for the fact that he was still rational and knew her temper and bottom line, he would have turned into a wolf and done something to her on the couple's seat. In the end, he only kissed and hugged her, kissing her until her cheeks were hot, her clothes and coat were wrinkled, and there was a faint mark on her neck. Compared to the impulsive young couples on the couple's seat behind her, she was not much different. When the movie ended, the two of them didn't know what the whole movie was about. When she walked out, Fong Ling refused to look back and walked all the way out of the theater. After getting into the car, she pulled down the mirror in front of her and looked at it. When she saw the mark on her neck, she immediately glanced coldly at the man in the driver's seat. Li Nanheng chuckled softly. "Sorry, I couldn't control myself." She couldn't control herself. Fong Ling could already imagine what it would be like at night. She felt that she needed to buy 2 high-collared shirts. Previously, Li Nanheng asked her what she wanted to do, but in fact, she didn't have anything to do. She felt that since she was a child, she didn't have a strong personal goal. Except for living well, she didn't have anything special. Later, what she really wanted, it was probably Li Nanheng. Although she didn't admit it in the past. "It's almost evening. You got up early today. Are you tired? Go straight to the hotel?" As the man spoke, he also glanced at her neck. He wanted to avoid it at night as much as possible, lest she accidentally exposed it in front of the newcomers. After all, Drillmaster Fong Ling still had to maintain her dignity. "There seems to be a department store nearby. I'll go buy some things." Fong Ling didn't think that Li Nanheng, a man who could make her die in bed, would be merciful. She had already thought of a way in advance and planned to buy 2 high-collared clothes. Hearing her request, Li Nanheng drove the car over. She had a clear goal. After entering the mall, she did not wander around but went straight to the women's clothing counters, looking for those high-necked clothes. At first, Li Nanheng did not notice what she was going to buy and only let her go in. He looked at the jewelry counters on the first floor for a while but did not see any jewelry suitable for her. Fong Ling's temperament was cold and noble. Other than often blushing in front of him, she was usually unsmiling. However, she was his wife after all. He accidentally married her 3 years ago, but now she was a living person in front of him. Although she didn't know about this, he still had to make up for it sooner or later. The Li family often contacted several internationally renowned designers in France. It was better to customize a set of jewelry for her personality and temperament. It would be 100 times better than the ones she bought. In his life, except for Feng Ling, Li Nanheng had never treated anyone better than he wanted to. However, no matter how well he treated her, he couldn't make up for her drifting on the sea when she was 1 year old and living in the jungle before she was 5 years old. Even if he stuffed all the best things in the world into her arms, he would still feel sorry for her. He didn't buy jewelry. Seeing that she was still buying clothes upstairs, the man walked to the VCA counter and stopped. Half an hour later, Feng Ling bought the clothes. She bought 2 high-collared shirts, one black and one white. It happened to be cold recently, so it wouldn't be too heavy under the uniform. After going downstairs, she saw the man standing in front of the door smoking. There were many men in the base, and there were many men who smoked. However, after so many years, it seemed that only Li Nanheng's smoking posture was so beautiful that she couldn't bear to look away. She looked for a while, looked down at the clothes in the bag in her hand, took a deep breath, and walked in the direction of the man. As soon as she walked out, Li Nanheng seemed to feel her gaze. Without waiting for her to speak, he turned back and saw her. Seeing the bag in her hand, he didn't know what it was, but it seemed to be clothes. It was rare to see her shopping for clothes. The man raised his eyebrows, held a cigarette in one hand, and put the other in the pocket of his black trench coat. When she approached, he took out a blue box and gave it to her. "What is this?" Feng Ling took it. Seeing the exquisite and beautiful box, she thought he bought some jewelry for her. She was about to say that she was now a drill master in the base and couldn't wear jewelry, which was not good for her. However, before she spoke, the man put out the cigarette in his hand and said lightly, "Open it." Feng Ling paused and opened the box. She saw that there was a watch inside, and the dial was a bright starry sky. The color of the watch was low-key and matched well with the clothes, but at the same time, because of the bright starry sky on the dial, it looked particularly noble and beautiful. Li Nanheng knew this better than her. Usually, some young men would wear only one earring or some men's jewelry in order to look cool, which would usually be confiscated and punished as a violation of the rules. Therefore, even if Feng Ling was a woman, she was still the same as everyone else. She couldn't wear jewelry casually in the base. Jewelry could be kept in the residence, but she couldn't wear it out in public. But she could wear a watch. She was surprised and looked up at him, but the man turned to look at the sky outside. "It's dark. It should snow later. Let's go. This watch, it's for you." Although Feng Ling didn't know much about various brands, she knew the VCA brand. After all, she had lived in High City. Although Jean Wan was low-key and would never wear those famous brands, she had many colleagues and daughters of famous families. Feng Ling had seen many of them. She knew that the jewelry and watches of this brand were not cheap. Although she didn't know how much this one was, she knew it would not be less than 1.5 million yuan. She also knew that Li Nanheng was very rich, but such an expensive thing, why are you standing there? Li Nanheng was about to walk down the stairs in front of the shopping mall. Noticing that she was still standing there, he turned back and pulled her over by the wrist. When she bumped into his arms, he put his arm around her shoulder and lowered his voice to threaten her. "I haven't given you anything. This is the first time I bought you a gift. If you dare to return it, don't even think about sleeping tonight." Feng Ling. The threat of this sentence was stronger than anything else. She hurriedly put the watch and the box into her pocket and had no intention of returning it. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.